Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Frank Millstone, and I've been a ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 13 years. In all that time, I never believed the old Cherokee warnings about hungry mountains. I should have listened. It was October 1962, unseasonably warm for the season. The morning mist clung to the trees longer than usual, and something felt off about the whole mountain. Birds weren't singing. Even the insects had gone quiet. After 13 years walking these trails, you learn to notice when nature holds its breath. I was patrolling the remote sections near Cataract Falls, about 15 miles from the nearest road. My radio crackled with static as I checked in with headquarters. "This is Ranger Millstone, Sector 7 clear," I reported, adjusting my Coleman lantern on my belt. The response came back fuzzy, but I caught enough to know all was quiet elsewhere in the park. At 41, I'd seen plenty of strange things in these mountains. Hikers getting lost, weather turning deadly without warning, bears acting aggressive. My grandfather used to tell stories about these hills. He'd been a moonshiner back in the day, knew every hollow and ridge. He always said the Cherokee knew things about this land that white folks never would. "Respect the mountain," he'd tell me, "or it'll teach you respect the hard way." I'd grown up here, third-generation Appalachian. After Korea took some shrapnel in my leg, I came home with a limp and a need for quiet. The mountains gave me both. My wife passed 3 years back, and my teenage daughter Sarah lives with my sister down in Gatlinburg now. These trails became my family, my purpose. That morning, I was investigating reports from a family who'd camped near the falls 2 nights prior. They'd called the ranger station in a panic, talking about hearing the mountain breathe. Deep rumbling sounds coming from underground, they said. The father swore the ground vibrated under their feet. Probably just settling. I'd told my partner Jake when the report came in. October's when the ground shifts with the temperature changes. But as I hiked toward their former campsite, my boots crunching on fallen leaves, I couldn't shake the feeling that something watched me. The trees seemed to lean in closer. My compass needle wavered, which was odd. It had always been reliable. When I reached the spot where the family had camped, I stopped cold. Their campsite was still there, tents perfectly set up, camping gear neatly arranged around a cold fire pit. But no people. Like they'd just vanished into thin air. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed strangely, seeming to fall into the earth instead of carrying through the trees. That's when I saw it. About 10 feet from their main tent was a circular depression in the ground, maybe 6 feet across. The edges were perfectly smooth, like someone had used a giant cookie cutter. I knelt down and touched the rim. The soil felt warm, even though the morning air was cool. I pulled out my field notebook and sketched the depression, noting its size and location. 13 years of ranger training kicked in. Document everything, look for logical explanations. Could be a sinkhole. These limestone mountains were full of caves and underground water. Maybe the ground just gave way, but sinkholes aren't perfectly round, and they don't leave warm soil. I keyed my radio. "Base, this is Millstone. I'm at the Cataract Falls campsite. Found the site abandoned, but all gear is still here. Also have an unusual ground depression that needs investigating." The radio crackled with static. Through the noise, I heard, "Copy. Sending Jake. Arrive, 2 hours." I decided to wait for backup before exploring further. But as I sat on a fallen log near the depression, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The ground beneath my feet was vibrating. Just slightly, like a cat purring. And if I listened real careful, I could swear I heard breathing coming from somewhere deep underground. Jake arrived 2 hours later, hiking up the trail with his usual skeptical grin. "So what's got our veteran mountain man spooked?" he called out as he approached. Jake was 15 years younger than me, college-educated, full of scientific explanations for everything. Good ranger, but he looked at these mountains like a textbook instead of living things. "Take a look," I said, pointing to the depression. His expression changed as he examined it. He walked around the edge, pulling out his own measuring tape. "That's unusual," he admitted. Perfectly circular, no debris at the bottom. Put your hand on the soil, I told him. He knelt and pressed his palm to the earth. His eyebrows shot up. It's warm. How is it warm? Been like that all morning. And Jake, listen. We both crouched down, ears near the ground. The breathing sound was clearer now, rhythmic and deep, like something massive sleeping far below us. Could be an underground stream, Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction. Or gas escaping from a cave system. When's the last time you heard gas breathing in rhythm? Before he could answer, we heard voices coming up the trail. 3 young people with heavy backpacks, college kids by the look of them. A blonde girl and 2 guys, all wearing bright new hiking gear that screamed weekend warriors. Excuse me, the blonde called out. We're looking for the best camping spots near the falls. Someone in town said this area was perfect. I stood up, blocking their view of the depression. I'm sorry, but this area is closed for geological assessment. You'll need to camp at least 2 miles downstream. Geological assessment? One of the guys asked. What happened? Ground instability, Jake said smoothly. Safety precaution. The kids looked disappointed but didn't argue. Rangers don't usually negotiate with hikers about safety issues. They shouldered their packs and headed back down the trail. Good call, Jake said once they were out of earshot. Whatever this is, we don't need civilians wandering around it. But as we watched them disappear down the trail, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The depression had grown. When I'd first found it that morning, it was maybe 6 feet across. Now it was clearly 9 feet, with the same perfectly smooth edges. Jake, I grabbed his arm. Look at the depression. He measured it again, his face going pale. 9 feet, 4 inches. That's impossible. Ground doesn't just expand. I pulled out my topographic map and showed him the location. This area sits right on top of what used to be a Cherokee village, disappeared in 1839, around the time of the removal. Local stories say the people just vanished one day. No trace except for some artifacts scattered around. You think this is connected to some 100-year-old Cherokee village? I think we need to contact the tribal council. My grandfather always said the Cherokee knew things about these mountains that we don't. We spent the rest of the afternoon documenting everything, taking photographs, soil samples, temperature readings. The breathing sound grew louder as the day wore on. By evening, it was clearly audible from 20 feet away. As the sun started setting, we made camp about 50 yards from the depression. Jake wanted to stay overnight, observe any changes. I radioed our position to headquarters and settled in for what I hoped would be a quiet night. It wasn't. Around midnight, I woke to Jake shaking my shoulder. Frank, you need to see this. The depression now glowed with a faint, pale light. Not electric light, don't mice, something organic like foxfire or phosphorescent fungi. And the breathing had changed. Instead of the steady rhythm we'd heard all day, it now came in short, urgent pants. It's like it's excited, Jake whispered. That's when we heard the screaming, high-pitched, terrified screaming coming from somewhere underground. Human screaming. I grabbed my flashlight and ran toward the sound. The screaming was definitely coming from inside the depression. I shone my light down into it and saw something that defied everything I thought I knew about the world. The depression wasn't just a hole in the ground anymore. It was a mouth. The smooth edges had become lips, lined with what looked like stone teeth. And 40 feet down, barely visible in my flashlight beam, were the 3 college kids we'd sent away earlier. They were alive, standing on a narrow ledge, looking up at us with terror in their eyes. Help us, the blonde girl screamed. Something grabbed us. The ground just opened up and swallowed us. Jake stood beside me, his mouth hanging open. That's impossible, he kept muttering. That's completely impossible. But impossible or not, those kids were trapped. And as I watched, the stone lips began to slowly close. I didn't hesitate. 13 years of ranger training kicked in. People in danger come first, figure out explanations later. Jake, get the climbing gear from my pack, now. While Jake scrambled for the rope and harnesses, I called down to the kids, stay calm, we're going to get you out. The blonde girl, she'd told us her name was Amy, looked up with tears streaming down her face. It's alive, she sobbed. The whole mountain is alive. We set up camp downstream, like you said, But then the ground started shaking, and we ran back this way. That's when it opened up and pulled us in. One of the guys, a tall kid with sandy hair, pointed to the walls around them. There are things down here. Old things. Bones and artifacts, and... He shuddered. I think we're not the first people this has happened to. I rigged up a hasty rappelling system using a sturdy oak tree as an anchor point. I'm coming down, I called. Jake, you stay up top and manage the rope. Frank, this is insane. Jake hissed. We should call for backup, get a full rescue team. No time, look. The stone lips were definitely closing, maybe an inch every few minutes. In an hour, maybe 2, that opening would be sealed shut. I clipped into the rope and started my descent into what I was already thinking of as the mountain's mouth. My flashlight beam revealed more details that made my skin crawl. The walls weren't just earth and stone, they were carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Cherokee writing, maybe, but older. Much older. As I descended, the breathing sound got louder. It was coming from deeper in the cavern, beyond where the kids were trapped. Something huge was down there, something that had been sleeping until now. I reached the ledge where the 3 college students huddled together. The space was about 6 feet wide and maybe 10 feet long, big enough for all of us, but barely. Is anyone hurt? I asked, doing a quick visual check. Just scared, said the sandy-haired kid. I'm Mike, by the way. That's Amy and Derek, he pointed to his companions. Derek, a shorter kid with dark hair, grabbed my arm. Ranger, you have to see this. He led me to the back of the ledge, where his flashlight illuminated a horrifying sight. The cavern extended much deeper than I'd thought, and it was full of people, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all standing perfectly still in alcoves carved into the stone walls. They looked like they were sleeping standing up, but their clothes. Some wore modern hiking gear, others had clothing from decades past. I saw a woman in a 1940s dress, a man in what looked like a World War I uniform. They're not dead, Amy whispered. Watch their chests. They're breathing, but real slow, like they're hibernating. I shined my light on the nearest figure, a middle-aged man in 1950s camping gear. His chest rose and fell maybe once every 30 seconds. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful. How long have they been here? Mike asked. Before I could answer, a voice echoed through the cavern. Not human, something older, speaking in a language I didn't understand but somehow knew was Cherokee. The words seemed to come from the stone itself. Then, impossibly, I understood. Not the words, but the meaning. Like the voice was speaking directly into my mind. Asterisk, the disrespectful ones sleep until they learn respect. The mountain feeds on those who take without giving, who walk without reverence. Asterisk. The voice paused, and I felt its attention focus on me like a physical weight. Asterisk, you are different, mountain-born. Your blood knows these stones, but these others. Asterisk, the breathing sound grew louder, more agitated. The stone lips above us closed another inch. We have to get out of here, I said. Now, I called up to Jake. Send down 3 more harnesses, fast. Frank, what's happening down there? I can hear voices, but they're not coming from you guys. Just send the gear. As Jake lowered the equipment, the voice spoke again, this time in accented English. Asterisk. Why do you protect the wasteful ones, mountain son? They came to my sacred places with loud voices and careless feet. They scattered their trash and showed no gratitude. The mountain hungers for such as these. Asterisk, I looked at the 3 college kids. They were terrified, but they were also just young people who'd made a mistake. They didn't know, I called out to the cavern. They meant no disrespect. A sound like laughter made of grinding stone echoed around us. Asterisk, ignorance is not innocence, but you. You carry the old blood. Your grandfather walked these paths with proper reverence. For his sake, I will test them. Asterisk. The ledge beneath our feet began to crumble. Move, I shouted, pushing the kids toward the ropes as the stone gave way. We clipped in just as our refuge collapsed into the deeper darkness below. Now we hung suspended in the mountain's mouth, 40 feet from safety. With the stone lips closing overhead and something ancient and hungry stirring in the depths beneath us. And that's when I remembered what my grandfather had told me about dealing with the old spirits of these mountains. You don't fight them, you don't run from them. You talk to them in the old way, with respect and humility. Great Spirit, I called out in Cherokee, using words my grandfather had taught me as a child. I ask for mercy for these young ones. They are like children who don't know better. Allow me to teach them the proper way. The closing of the stone lips slowed, then stopped. Asterisk, speak, mountain son. But know that the mountain's patience grows thin. Asterisk, I hung there in the darkness, 3 terrified college kids clinging to ropes beside me, trying to remember every Cherokee word my grandfather had taught me. Above us, Jake's voice was calling down, asking what was happening. Below us, something ancient and powerful waited for my answer. Great Guardian, I said, mixing Cherokee and English, hoping the spirit would understand my respect even if my pronunciation was rough. These young ones come from cities far away. They don't know the sacred places or the proper ceremonies. But they have good hearts. The voice rumbled through the stone around us, contemplative now. Asterisk, good hearts? They leave their mark on sacred ground. They take photographs without permission. They see the mountain as their playground. Asterisk, I looked at Amy, Mike, and Derek. They were listening to every word, finally understanding that their lives depended on more than just climbing out of a hole. That's true, I admitted. But punish me for not teaching them better. I'm the ranger here. It's my job to protect both the mountain and the people who visit it. Asterisk, you would take their place in the sleeping chambers. Asterisk. The question hit me like a physical blow. I thought of my daughter Sarah, already without a mother, now potentially losing her father too. But I looked at these kids, barely older than she was, and knew what I had to do. If that's what it takes, Amy gasped. No, Ranger, you can't. Quiet, I told her gently. Then louder, Great Spirit, I offer myself in exchange for their lives, but I ask one thing in return. Asterisk, speak. Asterisk, let me teach them first. Let them understand what they've done wrong, so they can go back to their world and teach others about respecting sacred places. The cavern fell silent except for the sound of breathing. Ours, quick and panicked, and the mountains, slow and deep. Finally, the voice spoke again, but now it sounded different. Younger somehow, and sadder. Asterisk, you speak like your grandfather, mountain son. He was the last white man to understand the old agreements. When the Cherokee were driven from this land, I made a promise to guard their sacred places. For generations I have kept faith. But the people who come now, they have forgotten how to listen. Asterisk images flooded my mind, not my own memories, but the mountains. I saw Cherokee families living in harmony with the land for centuries. I saw the forced removal in 1839, families torn from their homes, and I saw the sacred burial ground where we now hung, a place where Cherokee ancestors had been laid to rest with ceremonies and respect. The village that disappeared, I whispered. They didn't just vanish, you protected them. Asterisk. They chose to sleep rather than be driven away. Someday, when the world remembers how to show proper respect, they will wake. Asterisk, I understood now. The people in the alcoves weren't prisoners. They were refugees. Some were Cherokee who had chosen eternal sleep over exile. Others were people from different times who had somehow earned the spirit's protection or punishment. What about us? Mike asked quietly. What do we have to do? The spirit's attention turned to the 3 students, and I felt its ancient power examining to them, reading their hearts. Asterisk. The tall one, asterisk, it said, focusing on Mike, asterisk, carries guilt about his grandfather's farm. He knows about taking from the land without giving back. Asterisk, Mike's face went white. How could you possibly know about that? Asterisk. The girl fears she is not worthy of the beauty around her. She takes pictures to prove she was here, but never truly sees. Asterisk, Amy started crying again, but nodded. Asterisk, and the quiet one thinks the land exists to serve him, but begins to understand differently. Asterisk, Derek, who had barely spoken since we'd found them, finally spoke up. You're right, I never thought about. I just saw it as scenery, like a postcard. The mountain spirit was quiet for a long moment. Then, asterisk, they can learn. But learning requires sacrifice. They must each give something precious to the mountain, something that represents their old way of thinking. Asterisk, I felt the ropes supporting us beginning to move upward. The spirit was lifting us toward the surface. What kind of sacrifice? I asked. Asterisk. The tall one must return his grandfather's stolen earth to its proper place. The girl must break her picture-taking device and learn to see with her heart. The quiet one must spend one full day sitting silent in the woods, listening to what the mountain teaches. Asterisk. As we rose through the mountain's mouth, I saw Jake's worried face peering down at us. The stone lips had opened wide again, like a yawn. And if they don't, I had to ask. Asterisk. Then they will dream the long sleep until they do. Asterisk. We reached the surface, and Jake hauled us up onto solid ground. The depression in the earth was still there, but now it looked like a natural sinkhole again. No stone lips, no carved symbols. Just earth and rock. Frank, Jake said, grabbing my shoulder, what happened down there? You were gone for 20 minutes, but I could hear voices, and the ground was shaking, and, Jake, I interrupted, we need to close this area, permanently. Put up barriers, reroute the trails. This is a sacred burial ground, and it needs to be left alone. The 3 college kids stood together, looking shaken but somehow older than they had that morning. Ranger Millstone, Amy said, we'll do what it asked, whatever we have to do. Mike nodded. My family's farm in Ohio. We've been strip mining part of it. I know it's wrong. I'll stop it. Derek was staring at the ground where the mouth had been. I heard it, he said quietly. The mountain. It was trying to teach us something all along, wasn't it? We just weren't listening. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of what was now officially called the Geological Hazard Zone. The Park Service had accepted my recommendation to permanently close the area and reroute the trails. A small sign marked it as unstable ground, dangerous to approach. Only I knew the real reason for the closure. Amy had written to me 3 times since that October day. She'd smashed her expensive camera that night, like the spirit asked, and now she worked as a volunteer for Native American rights groups. She was learning to see with her heart, she said. Mike had convinced his family to stop the strip mining operation on their farm and was studying environmental law. It cost them money they didn't have. But he said some things were more important than profit. Derek sent postcards but never wrote much. The postcards were always pictures of forests and mountains, and on the back he'd write things like, listening, or learning to be quiet. All 3 had come back to the Smokies that spring to sit quietly by the closed area. They didn't ask to go in, just sat for a few hours in silence. I watched them from a distance and saw that they understood something they hadn't before. I'd started meeting with Cherokee elders, learning the proper names for places in the park and the stories that went with them. Slowly, carefully, I was working to change how we managed the land. Instead of just protecting it from people, we were learning to help people understand their relationship with it. My daughter Sarah had moved back from Gatlinburg to live with me. At 17, she was old enough to understand when I told her the real story of what happened that October. She wanted to learn Cherokee too, to carry on what her great-grandfather had started. But sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist clung to the trees, I'd check the geological hazard zone. The depression was still there, looking like a natural sinkhole. But if you knew how to listen, you could still hear the mountain breathing. Jake had transferred to another park that winter. He said the Smokies felt too quiet now, like something was always watching. He wasn't wrong. The Cherokee elder who'd helped me understand the mountain's story told me that the spirit was older than memory, one of the first guardians placed to protect sacred ground. It would always be there, sleeping lightly, ready to wake if people forgot how to show respect. Your grandfather was right, the elder said. The mountain will teach respect, one way or another. Better to learn the easy way. I think about that every time I take new rangers on patrol. I teach them to listen to the mountains, to watch for signs that something isn't right. I tell them the old stories, even if they think I'm just sharing folklore, because I know the truth now. These mountains are alive, and they remember everything. They remember the Cherokee families who lived here for generations. They remember the promises made and broken. They remember every person who walked these trails with respect, and everyone who didn't. And in the quiet places, in the deep woods where the tour buses never go, they're still watching, still teaching, still protecting what's sacred. The mountain's mouth is closed now, but it's not gone. It's just waiting, patient as stone, for the next lesson it needs to teach. Respect the mountain, my grandfather always said. Now I know why. My name is Marcus Ironridge, and I've been a ranger in the Jefferson National Forest for 12 years. Before that, I spent 3 years in Vietnam, which is something I don't talk about much. The mountains here in Virginia are my therapy, always have been. Every trail I walk, every tree I mark, every lost hiker I find, it all helps push back the memories of the war. I'm 39 now, divorced, and I see my daughter Emily every other weekend. I live in a small cabin, about 5 miles from the ranger station, and most days, that's exactly how I like it. Quiet. Peaceful. Just me and the mountains. People around here know me as the guy who doesn't believe in ghost stories. When hikers come back with tales about strange things in the woods, I always have an explanation. Shadows on rocks, bears standing up, owls making weird sounds. In 12 years, I've never seen anything I couldn't explain with common sense and a little wilderness knowledge. That all changed in October of 1981. It was a Tuesday morning when the first call came in. I was at the station, fixing a broken axe handle, when Sally from dispatch radioed me. "Marcus, we've got 3 different groups reporting something strange up on Mount Pleasant." "What kind of strange?" I asked, not really worried. Mount Pleasant was part of an old Cherokee hunting ground, and people loved to make up stories about it. They all say the same thing, some kind of huge person walking between the ridges. They say it was moving too fast, covering miles in just a few minutes. I laughed. "Sally, it's probably just a big guy out for a hike. Maybe he's in really good shape." "Marcus," they said, "this thing was 8 feet tall." I stopped laughing. 8 feet was bear territory, not human. And if a bear was walking around on its back legs in the middle of the day, that meant it was sick or injured. Dangerous. "I'll check it out," I said. I grabbed my gear, CB radio, first aid kit, trail tools, and the compass I'd carried since Vietnam. It was a clear day, perfect October weather. The leaves were bright red and gold, and you could see for miles across the valleys. If something big was out there, I'd spot it easy. The drive to Mount Pleasant took 40 minutes. I parked at the north trailhead and started hiking up. The trail was quiet, too quiet. I'm used to hearing birds, squirrels, the usual forest noise. But that day, it felt like everything was holding its breath. About 2 miles in, I found the first footprint. It was in a muddy spot beside the trail, and when I saw it, I stopped dead. The print was at least 18 inches long, bigger than any boot I'd ever seen, and the stride length between prints was 6 feet. Nobody walks with steps that long. Nobody human, anyway. I knelt down and looked closer. 5 toes, just like a person. But the depth of the print suggested something incredibly heavy. I took out my pocket camera and snapped a few pictures, then kept walking. That's when things got really weird. About 50 yards further up, I found handprints on a tree. They were pressed into the bark about 12 feet off the ground, as if something had reached up and grabbed the trunk. The hands were huge, twice the size of mine. My CB radio crackled. I pulled it out, expecting Sally's voice. Instead, I heard something that made my skin go cold. It was voices speaking in a language I didn't know, rhythmic, old-sounding. It went on for about 10 seconds, then cut off to static. "Sally?" I called into the radio. "Sally, are you there?" Nothing but static. I kept hiking, but my hand stayed near the knife on my belt. The trail wound up the ridge, and I checked my watch every few minutes. Something felt off about time itself, like I was walking faster than I should be, covering ground too quickly. At the top of the ridge, I met David Walkingstick, the Cherokee tribal liaison who sometimes helped us with historical sites. He was standing at the overlook, staring across the valley at the next ridge over. "Marcus," he said, not looking at me, "you see it?" "See what?" He pointed. "There." I looked across the valley. The next ridge was at least 3 miles away, and standing on top of it, clear as day, was a figure. Even from that distance, I could tell it was massive, way too tall to be a person. As I watched, the figure took a step. But it didn't step forward along the ridge. It stepped times between times ridges, like the mountains were stepping stones and the valley didn't exist. 1 second, it was 3 miles away. The next second, it was on a ridge a mile to the south. "What the hell?" I whispered. David finally looked at me. His face was serious, scared even. "You never believed in the old stories, did you, Marcus?" "No," I said, my mouth dry. "I never did." "You better start," he said. Because the ridge walker is back, and something's made him very, very angry. David and I hiked back down together. He didn't say much, which wasn't like him. Usually, he'd talk about history or plants or his grandkids. But that day, he just walked, his face tight with worry. When we got to my truck, he finally spoke. "There's a meeting tonight at the tribal center. You should come." "David, I need to file a report about." "About what?" he interrupted. "About something that walks between mountains? They'll think you're crazy. Come to the meeting first. Then decide what to tell your bosses." He was right. I drove back to the station and told Sally I was following up on the reports, but I didn't mention what I'd seen. I couldn't. I didn't even believe it myself. That evening, I drove to the tribal center. It was a small building near Cherokee, about 30 minutes from my cabin. Inside, about 15 people sat in a circle, elders mostly, but a few younger folks too. David introduced me. "This is Marcus Ironridge. He's a good man. He saw the walker today." An old woman named Mary spoke first. Her voice was soft but strong. "The ridge walker appears when sacred places are threatened. He's been gone for many years, but now he's back." She looked at me. "What do you know about Mount Pleasant, Marcus?" "It's part of the National Forest," I said. "Used to be Cherokee hunting grounds, I think." "Not just hunting grounds," Mary said. "It's where our warriors went for vision quests, where they spoke to the spirits. There are burial sites up there, old ones, sacred ones." A younger man named Thomas leaned forward. "There's a development company that wants to build a resort on Mount Pleasant. They got approval last month. Construction starts Monday." My stomach dropped. "Where exactly?" "The North Ridge," Thomas said. "Right where you found those prints today." Mary continued. "The ridge walker protects these places. He's not a monster, he's a guardian. But when he's angry..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "What happens when he's angry?" I asked. Nobody answered right away. Finally, David said, "People disappear, or they go mad, or they see things that break their minds." I should have walked out right then, should have gone home and forgotten the whole thing. But something in Mary's eyes made me stay. She looked scared, genuinely scared, and I'd learned in Vietnam that when old warriors look scared, you pay attention. "What do I do?" I asked. "Watch," Mary said. "Protect the mountain if you can, and if you see the walker again." She paused. "Don't run. He respects courage. Show him you're trying to help." I drove home that night with my head spinning. The rational part of my brain said it was all stories, mass hallucination, mistaken identity, something. But the part of me that had seen weird things in the jungle, the part that knew the world was stranger than people wanted to admit, that part believed every word. The next morning, I got a call from Sally, before I even finished my coffee. "Marcus, we've got a problem. Multiple people are reporting the same thing, that tall figure is appearing on different ridges at the same time." "That's impossible," I said. "I know it's impossible. But we've got 6 different witnesses, all with watches, all saying they saw it on 6 different ridges within the same 10-minute period." I grabbed my gear and headed out. This time I brought David with me. We drove up to different overlooks throughout the day, talking to witnesses. They were all normal people, families, hikers, a couple of bird watchers. None of them seemed crazy, and they all described the same thing. A figure, impossibly tall, moving between mountains like it was folding space. At our third stop, we found something new. Fresh petroglyphs on rocks near the trail, ancient-looking symbols that David said were Cherokee, but in a style so old that even he didn't recognize all of them. "These weren't here last week," David said. "I check these trails all the time." "Maybe somebody carved them recently," I suggested. He shook his head. "Look at the oxidation on the rock. Look at the weathering in the grooves. Marcus, these look hundreds of years old, but they appeared overnight." That's when I heard it, a sound like thunder, but wrong. It rolled across the valley, echoing in a way that made my teeth hurt. Every bird in the forest went silent. The wind stopped. David grabbed my arm. "He's close." We stood there, frozen, listening. The thunder sound came again, and this time I realized it wasn't thunder at all. It was footsteps. Massive, ground-shaking footsteps. Something moved in the trees about 100 yards away. I saw it between the trunks, a shape too tall, too thin, moving in a way that hurt to watch. It didn't walk like a person or an animal. It flowed, like water running uphill. My radio crackled to life. That same ancient language poured out, words I couldn't understand, but that made my head swim. The voice was deep, old, and sad, so sad it made my chest ache. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. The bird sounds came back. The wind picked up. David and I stood there, breathing hard, not saying anything. Finally, I managed to speak. "We need to stop that construction." "How?" David asked. "It's all legal. The company bought the land rights years ago." "Then we need to make it illegal," I said. "There has to be a way." David looked at me with something like hope in his eyes. "If we find proof of burial sites' archaeological evidence, we could get a federal protection order. But we'd need to find it before Monday." "How long do we have?" 3 days, David said. "We have 3 days to save that mountain." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing moving through the trees. I kept hearing that sad, ancient voice on my radio. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up and drove to my cabin. I made coffee and spread out maps of Mount Pleasant on my kitchen table. If there were burial sites up there, they'd probably be near water sources or in protected areas, places where ancient people would have wanted to honor their dead. My phone rang. It was David. "Can't sleep either?" I asked. "Mary wants to do a ceremony tomorrow night," he said. "She thinks if we show respect, the walker might guide us to what we need to find." "David, I know you don't believe in ceremonies, but do you believe in what you saw today?" I didn't answer right away. Finally, I said, "Yeah, I believe it." "Then trust us on this. Be at the North Trailhead tomorrow at sunset." The next day dragged by. I had regular ranger duties, checking permits, helping a family whose car wouldn't start, clearing a fallen tree from a trail. Normal stuff. But my mind was on that mountain the whole time. At sunset, I met David, Mary, and Thomas at the trailhead. Mary carried a leather bag filled with tobacco, sage, and other things I didn't recognize. We hiked up in silence as the sun dropped behind the mountains. At the top of the ridge, Mary built a small fire. She spoke in Cherokee, her voice rising and falling like a song. She put tobacco in the flames, and the smoke rose straight up, even though there was a breeze. Then she turned to me. "Marcus Ironridge, you carry pain from war. You understand sacrifice. The walker will see this in you. Open your mind to him." I wanted to argue, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way the smoke moved. Maybe it was the absolute silence of the forest around us. Or maybe I just needed to believe in something bigger than myself again. Mary gave me a cup of bitter tea. I drank it. The world shifted. I can't explain it any better than that. One moment I was sitting by a fire on a mountain ridge, and the next moment I was somewhere else. Still on the mountain, but different. The trees glowed from inside. The rocks pulsed with slow, ancient rhythms. And the distances between the ridges looked thin, like paper that could fold. A figure stood on the ridge across from me. The walker. But now I could see him clearly. He wasn't a monster. He was a man, or had been, once. Incredibly tall, yes, but human-shaped. His skin had the texture of tree bark, and his eyes were old beyond measure. He wore clothes that looked like they were woven from shadows and morning mist. He spoke, and somehow I understood. Not with my ears, with something deeper. Asterisk. The earth here is wounded. They dig into sacred ground. They disturb my people's rest. They asterisk. I want to stop them, I said, surprised that I could speak. Show me how. The walker moved, and suddenly I was seeing through his eyes. I saw the mountain as it had been centuries ago, Cherokee warriors sitting in circles, praying. I saw burial sites hidden under particular trees. I saw caves with paintings on the walls. I saw an entire history written into the land itself. Then he showed me what the construction would destroy. Bulldozers ripping through burial grounds, ancient artifacts crushed under concrete, sacred sites buried under parking lots and swimming pools. The walker's sadness washed over me like a wave, but underneath it, I felt his anger too. An anger that could tear the mountain apart. Asterisk, if they will not listen. Asterisk, he said. Asterisk, I will make them leave. But many will suffer. Asterisk, give me time, I said. Let me try to stop them my way. Give me until Monday morning. The walker studied me. I felt him looking through me, seeing my war memories, my divorce, my struggles with Emily, everything. It should have felt like a violation, but instead it felt like being truly seen for the first time in years. Asterisk, you understand protection. Asterisk, he said finally. Asterisk, you understand what must be defended, even at great cost. I will wait. But if they break ground on sacred soil, I will not be gentle. Asterisk. The vision ended. I was back by the fire, gasping like I'd been underwater. Mary's hand was on my shoulder. Did you see? She asked. I saw, I managed to say. I know where to look. We hiked down by flashlight. I was shaky, exhausted, but my mind was racing. I'd seen specific locations, 3 burial sites, a cave with artifacts, and a rock formation that marked a ceremonial ground. If I could document even one of them before Monday, we could stop the construction. When I got home, I called an archaeologist I knew from a project 2 years ago. Dr. Sarah Chen, professor at UVA. I woke her up, but I didn't care. Sarah, I need you in Jefferson National Forest tomorrow morning. Emergency archaeological find. Marcus? It's midnight. I know, but I'm telling you. If you're not here by 9 a.m., something irreplaceable is going to be destroyed. There was a pause. Then, you're serious. Dead serious. I'll be there. I spent the rest of the night preparing. I printed maps, marked locations, gathered my evidence photos. I even wrote out a statement, trying to sound professional and sane while describing things I barely believed myself. At 3 a.m., my radio crackled. That ancient language again, but this time I understood a word here and there. Asterisk, brother. Guardian. Time runs short. Asterisk. I know, I said to the empty air. I'm trying. The radio went quiet, but I felt something, a presence, maybe, watching over me. The walker was waiting, hoping I could find another way. But in the back of my mind, I wondered, what if I couldn't? What would happen when those bulldozers rolled up the mountain on Monday morning? I had a feeling I really didn't want to find out. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived at 8:30 Sunday morning with 2 grad students and more equipment than seemed possible to fit in one truck. I met them at the ranger station and showed them my maps. Sarah studied them carefully. Marcus, these locations are incredibly specific. How did you... Does it matter? I interrupted. What matters is whether we can document them fast enough. She looked at me like she wanted to argue, then nodded. Okay, let's move. We hiked up to the first site, a grove of old oak trees that I'd seen in my vision. According to the walker, there were 3 burial sites underneath. Sarah's team used ground-penetrating radar, and within an hour, they'd found them. Oh my God, Sarah breathed, looking at the readings. Marcus, these are old. Really old. Pre-colonial, possibly pre-1400. This is a major find. Can you document it in time to stop the construction? I asked. She checked her watch. We need to notify the state archaeologist, file for emergency protection. If we work through the night, maybe. But we need more evidence. One site might not be enough. We moved to the second location, the cave. It was hidden behind a waterfall, exactly where the walker had shown me. Inside, we found pottery, shards, tool fragments, and wall paintings protected by the constant mist. Sarah was practically vibrating with excitement. This is incredible. This could rewrite what we know about Cherokee settlements in this region. But I was watching the sky. The sun was dropping fast. We had maybe 6 hours before the construction crews showed up for an early Monday start. The third site, I said, we need to check the third site. It was the ceremonial ground, a ring of stones on top of the ridge. But when we got there, we found something else too. A construction trailer had already been set up, along with survey markers and equipment. And sitting on a rock, smoking a cigarette, was a man in a suit. He looked up as we approached. You must be the ranger, he said. I'm Richard Hartley, project manager for Mountain View Resorts. Can I help you? This is an active archaeological site, Sarah said, stepping forward. You can't build here. Hartley laughed. Ma'am, we own this land. We have all the permits. And unless you have a court order, we start work in, he checked his watch, about 5 hours. We're filing for emergency protection right now, Sarah said. You do that, Hartley replied. But I'm guessing that paperwork takes a few days to process. We'll have the foundation poured by then. That's when the temperature dropped. I mean, times dropped times from a comfortable 60 degrees to what felt like freezing in about 10 seconds. Our breath came out in clouds. Hartley noticed too. What the hell? The ground started to shake. Not an earthquake, something else. It felt like footsteps, getting closer. Every bird in the forest went silent. The wind stopped. Everyone needs to leave, I said quietly. Right now. I'm not going anywhere, Hartley said. This is my... He never finished the sentence. The walker stepped out from between two trees that were too close together for anything that size to fit through. Sarah's grad students screamed. Hartley dropped his cigarette. Even Sarah, usually so calm and professional, grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. The walker was even bigger up close, 9 feet tall at least, maybe 10. His eyes glowed with a soft, sad light. He looked at Hartley, and when he spoke, everyone heard it. Not in our ears. In our heads. Asterisk, you will not dig here. Asterisk, Hartley's face went pale, then red. This is my land. You can't. You're not even real. This is some kind of trick. Asterisk, this land belonged to my people for 10,000 years. You have owned it for 10 months. Your claim means nothing. Asterisk. The walker raised his hand, and the ground around us changed. The construction trailer crumbled into rust. The survey markers sank into the earth like they'd never existed. The very rocks rearranged themselves into ancient patterns. Jesus Christ, Sarah whispered. But Hartley wasn't done. Maybe he was stupid, maybe he was stubborn, or maybe he just couldn't handle what he was seeing. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. I'm calling the National Guard. I'm pro. The walker moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. He didn't hurt Hartley, just touched his forehead with one finger. Hartley's eyes rolled back. He saw something, the same kind of vision I'd had, probably. When the walker pulled his hand back, Hartley collapsed to his knees, crying. I'm sorry, Hartley sobbed. I didn't know. I didn't understand. We'll stop. We'll stop everything. The walker turned to me. Asterisk. You tried to protect this place in your way. For that, I thank you, brother. But there are some battles that require old medicine. Asterisk. What about the development? I asked. Will he really stop it? Asterisk. He will tell his story. Some will believe, some will not. But you have your evidence now. Use it well. Asterisk. The walker looked at Sarah and her students. Asterisk. Tell the world what you found here. Make them understand that some places are sacred. Some ground should never be disturbed. Asterisk. Then he did something I didn't expect. He looked at me and smiled, a sad, ancient smile. Asterisk. Your war wounded you deeply. But wounds can become wisdom. The spirits you carry from that jungle, they honor your strength, not your failure. Remember that. Asterisk. Before I could respond, he stepped backward. Not back toward the trees, back through space itself. One step, and he was on the ridge a mile away. Another step, and he was gone. The temperature returned to normal. The birds started singing again. Everything seemed normal except for Hartley, still on his knees, and the four of us standing there trying to process what we'd just seen. Sarah was the first to speak. Did that actually happen? Yes, I said, and we need to document everything before someone decides we're all crazy. We worked through the night. Sarah and her team took photos, measurements, samples. Hartley, once he could stand again, made phone calls to his company, to lawyers, to anyone who would listen. He wasn't lying about stopping the development. The man had seen something that changed him completely. By Monday morning, we had everything we needed. Emergency protection order, federal archaeologists on their way, news crews setting up in the parking lot. The construction never started. 2 weeks later, the site was designated as protected archaeological ground. A month after that, it was on the National Register of Historic Places. That was 3 months ago. The mountain is safe now. Mountain View Resorts sold the land to a conservation trust. Sarah's team is still up there, carefully excavating and documenting. They've found things that are going to keep archaeologists busy for years. I still work as a ranger, still hike the same trails, help the same lost tourists, fix the same broken equipment. But something's different now. I sleep better. The nightmares from Vietnam aren't gone, but they're quieter. Like the walker said, I understand now that those wounds don't mean I'm broken. They mean I survived. They mean I'm strong enough to carry them. Emily notices the change. Last weekend, when she came to visit, she said, "Dad, you seem happier. What happened?" I almost told her the truth, almost explained about the walker and the sacred ground and the visions. But instead, I just said, "I made a new friend who helped me understand some things." Which isn't a lie. Not really. David and I meet up once a week now. Sometimes Thomas and Mary come too. We talk about the old stories, the sacred places, how to protect them. They've taught me Cherokee words, shown me how to recognize ancient sites, explained the history that never made it into textbooks. And sometimes, when I'm out on the trails alone, I feel him, the walker. Not close, he's not haunting me or anything. But I sense him out there, moving between the ridges, watching over his land. My radio still picks up that ancient language sometimes. I'm learning to understand more of it. Last week, I clearly heard, "Asterisk, thank you, brother." "Asterisk," I said, "you're welcome to the empty air," and didn't feel stupid doing it. Here's what I know now that I didn't know before. The world is bigger and stranger than most people want to believe. There are old things still here, ancient powers that were in these mountains long before rangers or developers or tourists ever showed up. Some people would find that scary. But me? I find it comforting. It means we're not alone. It means some battles have already been fought. Some ground has already been defended by warriors far more powerful than us. It means there's still something sacred left in the world. I'm back on Mount Pleasant today, checking the trails like always. The archaeologists wave as I pass their dig site. Hikers stop to ask questions. Everything seems normal. But I know better now. I know what walks between these ridges. I know what's watching over this land. And I know that as long as people like me, rangers, tribal liaisons, archaeologists, anyone who cares keep protecting these sacred places, the walker won't have to be angry anymore. He can just be what he was always meant to be. A guardian. A protector. A brother to those of us who understand that some things are worth defending, no matter the cost. I'm hiking back down now, the afternoon sun warm on my face. My radio crackles probably Sally with another lost hiker report. But before her voice comes through, I hear something else. Just for a second. Ancient words. A language old as these mountains. And I smile because now I know what they mean. Asterisk, walk in peace, brother. The mountain is safe. Asterisk, it is, I say quietly. And I'll make sure it stays that way. Because that's what rangers do. We protect, we serve. We watch over the wild places. Even when those places are watching back. My name is Catherine Ashwood, and I've been a ranger in Pisgah National Forest for 8 years now. I was the first woman to get the job in this district, which made some of the old-timers grumble at first, but they got over it. Before this, I taught second grade for 5 years. I loved teaching. But something about being out here in the mountains, sharing the forest with kids who'd never seen a real salamander or touched moss growing on ancient rocks, that felt even more right. People around here call me Cat. I'm 31, with auburn hair that frizzes up something awful in the humidity, and freckles that never fade no matter how much sunscreen I wear. I always carry my wildflower identification book in my backpack, along with the usual ranger stuff, first aid kit, whistle, radio, and about a dozen nature guides for the school groups I take out. I never had much interest in settling down and getting married. The forest was enough for me, and the kids I got to be everyone's favorite aunt without the actual responsibility. Every spring, I'd lead groups of excited third graders through the trails, teaching them to identify birds by their calls and showing them where the trilliums bloomed. The area I loved most was around Bloodroot Creek. In early spring, the forest floor there turns white with bloodroot flowers. These delicate little things with petals like tissue paper. They're called bloodroot because if you break the stem, red-orange sap bleeds out. The kids always thought that was fascinating in a slightly gross way. What I didn't know back in April of 1969 was that Bloodroot Creek had a history. A bad one. It started on a Tuesday morning. I was setting up for a field trip with Mrs. Henderson's third grade class from Brevard Elementary. 22 kids, all buzzing with energy, ready to tromp through the woods and hopefully learn something about forest ecology. The weather was perfect, sunny but cool, with that clean mountain smell in the grassy air. We were about an hour into our hike when 8-year-old Susie Marsh tugged on my sleeve. "Miss Cat," she said, "who are those other kids?" I looked around, counting heads like I always did. "What other kids, sweetie? Everyone's right here." "No, I mean the ones who taught us that game. During free time, when you were talking to Mrs. Henderson." I felt a small prickle of concern. "What game?" "Ring Around the Rosie." But they did it different than we usually do. They had different words. She scrunched up her face, trying to remember. Something about ashes and dust, and we all fall down. And they were wearing funny clothes, like old-fashioned dresses and knickers. I thought maybe they were from another school. I glanced at Mrs. Henderson, who shook her head. "There's no other group scheduled today," she said quietly. "Susie, honey, are you sure you saw other children? Maybe you were just playing pretend?" But Susie looked absolutely certain. "They were real, Miss Cat. There were 5 of them. They said they play here all the time." 3 other kids nodded in agreement. They'd all seen the same children. I didn't think much of it at first. Kids have amazing imaginations. Maybe they'd just gotten wrapped up in a pretend game and convinced themselves it was real. But something nagged at me as we continued our hike. The bloodroot flowers were blooming everywhere, which was strange because it was only early April. They usually didn't peak until mid-month. And they weren't just scattered randomly like normal. In several places, they formed almost perfect circles, like someone had planted them that way. Then I smelled it. That sweet, slightly spicy scent of bloodroot flowers, stronger than I'd ever noticed before. It seemed to hang in the air around the creek, even though we were a good 50 yards away. As we walked back to the parking lot, I heard something that made me stop. Children's laughter, echoing through the trees, high and clear and joyful. But when I counted my group, everyone was accounted for, and no one was laughing. The sound seemed to come from deeper in the forest, near the creek. "Did you hear that?" I asked Mrs. Henderson. She frowned. "Hear what?" The laughter had already faded. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I kept thinking about what Susie had said. 5 children in old-fashioned clothes, playing Ring Around the Rosie, playing by Bloodroot Creek. I decided to call Margaret Chen, the park historian. If anyone knew about weird stories connected to this area, it would be her. "Cat," Margaret answered on the 3rd ring. "What's up? Have you ever heard any unusual stories about Bloodroot Creek?" There was a pause. "What kind of unusual?" "Ghost stories. Specifically about children." Another pause, longer this time. "Why are you asking?" "Some kids on a field trip today claimed they saw children in old-fashioned clothes. Said these kids taught them games and then disappeared." Margaret let out a slow breath. I was hoping that was just a legend. "Listen, can you come by my office tomorrow? There's something you should see." Margaret's office in the visitor center was cluttered with maps, old photographs, and filing cabinets stuffed with research. When I arrived Wednesday morning, she had several documents spread across her desk. "I've been going through death records from the county," she said without preamble. "In the fall of 1918, the Spanish flu hit this area hard. Really hard." She pushed a ledger toward me. The pages were brittle and yellow, covered in careful handwriting. I scanned the entries, name after name, date after date. So many of them children. 23 kids died in a 6-week period, Margaret said quietly. Most of them from families who lived near what's now the Bloodroot Creek area. Back then, there was a small community there, maybe 15 families. The flu wiped out almost every child in that community. I felt cold. Where were they buried? That's the thing. The community cemetery was right by the creek. When the Forest Service bought the land in the 1932, most families had already moved away. The cemetery was forgotten. It's probably still there, overgrown. Why didn't anyone mark it? Put up a sign or something? Margaret shrugged sadly. Nobody remembered. Or maybe nobody wanted to remember. It was a terrible time. People tried to forget. I stared at the names in the ledger. Emma Patterson, age 7. Thomas Whitfield, age 9. Sarah and Samuel Grove, twins, age 6. 23 children who died alone and scared, coughing up blood, fever burning through their small bodies. 23 children buried and forgotten by Bloodroot Creek. "I'm going back out there," I said, "to look around. Cat, maybe you should. I need to see for myself." I drove back to the trailhead and hiked in alone. It was a gray morning, clouds hanging low over the mountains, threatening rain. The forest felt different without a group of chattering kids. Quieter. Watchful. When I reached Bloodroot Creek, I started searching the area more carefully. It didn't take long to find them small stones, worn smooth by decades of weather, half buried in leaves and soil. They formed rough rows beneath the trees. Some still had faint carvings, initials, dates. 1918. I was standing in the middle of a forgotten children's cemetery. As I walked between the stones, my boot struck something hard. I knelt and brushed away the leaves. It was a wooden top, the kind kids played with in the old days. The paint was faded but still visible, red and blue stripes. Then I saw another toy, a small cloth doll, sitting propped against a tree root. Its dress was rotted, but the face was still stitched on, one button eye missing. I hadn't put these here. Neither had anyone on yesterday's field trip. My radio crackled with static. I reached for it, about to check in with the main office, when I heard something through the white noise. Singing. Children's voices, thin and distant. Asterisk. Ring around the rosy. Asterisk. Asterisk. Pocket full of posies. Asterisk. Asterisk. Ashes. Ashes. Asterisk. Asterisk. We all fall down. Asterisk. I dropped the radio. The singing continued, coming from all around me now, not just from the radio. I spun in a circle, trying to locate the source, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then I saw them. 5 children stood on the far side of the creek. 3 girls in long dresses with high collars, 2 boys in knickers and caps. They were holding hands in a circle, playing Ring Around the Rosie, just like Susie had described. They looked completely solid, completely real, except for one thing. I could see through them, just slightly, like looking through fog. One of the girls looked up and saw me watching. She smiled and waved. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran back to my truck as fast as my legs would carry me, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'd seen something impossible, something that shouldn't exist. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, trying to catch my breath, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Stress, lack of sleep, too much sun yesterday. But I knew what I'd seen. I drove straight back to Margaret's office. They're real, I said, bursting through her door. The ghost children, they're real. I saw them. Margaret's face went pale. You saw them? In daylight? Clear as day. 5 kids, playing by the creek, just like in the records. She sat down heavily in her chair. Then it started again. What do you mean, again? I found something else this morning. Old incident reports from the 1930 seconds and 40 seconds. Every few years, there were reports of children seeing ghostly playmates near the creek, always in spring when the bloodroot blooms. The sightings stopped in the early 1950 seconds. I thought maybe the spirits had moved on. Well, they're back. My radio crackled again. This time it was Steve, another ranger. Cat, you there? Yeah, I'm here. We've got a situation. A couple brought their daughter in. She was hiking near Bloodroot Creek yesterday with her family. Now she's running a fever and complaining that her new friends want her to come back to the forest. Margaret and I looked at each other. I'm on my way, I said. The little girl's name was Emma, the same as one of the children in the 1918 death records. She was 7 years old, with blonde pigtails and glassy, fever-bright eyes. Her mother looked terrified. She's never been sick like this before. It came on so suddenly. And she keeps talking about children we never saw. She says they're her friends, and they're waiting for her. I knelt beside Emma's chair in the ranger station. Hi, sweetie. I'm Miss Cat. Can you tell me about your friends? Emma's eyes focused on me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. They're nice. They taught me games, old games. They said they've been waiting so long for someone to play with. What are their names? Sarah and Samuel. They're twins. And there's Thomas and Emma, just like me, and Mary. They all live by the creek. Those were names from the ledger. 4 of the 23. Emma, when did you start feeling sick? After I played with them, they held my hands and we danced in a circle. Their hands were so cold, but I didn't want to be rude and pull away. Then we all fell down, just like in the game. And when I got up, I felt funny. I touched her forehead. She was burning up. "We're taking her to the hospital right now," her father said. But she insisted she needed to tell the rangers about her friends first. She said they'd be mad if we left without telling you. After they left, I called Margaret. "The ghost children are making the living children sick. Flu-like symptoms. Yeah, high fever, just like the 1918 pandemic. Kat, I think they're trying to do more than just make friends. I've been reading about the Spanish flu outbreak. You know what people said about it? That it was so devastating because entire communities died together. Children watched their siblings die. Parents watched their kids die. Nobody died alone, but everyone died. So these children died together. They're bound to this place together, and I don't think they understand they're dead. They've been waiting here for over 50 years, lonely and confused, wanting playmates. And when living children show up, they try to bring them into their world. Make them sick like they were sick. Make them part of their eternal playgroup. I felt sick myself. How many kids have been to Bloodroot Creek in the last week? I don't know. It's spring. Probably dozens. Over the next 3 days, 5 more children were reported sick. All of them had visited Bloodroot Creek. All of them talked about new friends who wanted them to come back to the forest. I closed the trails around the creek, but I knew it wasn't enough. The ghost children were getting stronger. Each day, more toys appeared by the creek, hoops, balls, wooden blocks, all from different eras. And the bloodroot flowers kept blooming in those perfect circles, spreading farther from the creek each day. On Saturday morning, I went back to the creek alone. I had to try to understand what was happening. Maybe I could communicate with them somehow. The 5 children were there, playing the same game. Ring around the rosy. Over and over. This time, I didn't run. "Hello," I called out. They stopped playing and turned to look at me. Up close, I could see they weren't quite solid. They flickered slightly, like a candle flame in a gentle breeze. Their clothes were from the early 1900s, simple dresses for the girls, wool knickers and caps for the boys. The girl who'd waved at me before stepped forward. "You can see us. Most grown-ups can't see us anymore. Only children can. My name is Catherine. What's your name?" "Mary. Mary Patterson. That's my sister Emma, and those are the Grove twins, Sarah and Samuel, and that's Thomas Whitfield. We've been playing here forever and ever. Do you want to play with us?" Her voice was sweet and normal, just like any 7-year-old. But there was something wrong with her eyes. They were distant, unfocused, like she was looking past me at something far away. "Mary, do you know what year it is?" She tilted her head, confused. "It's 1918. Why?" "Mary, honey, it's 1969. That's 51 years later." She laughed. "That's silly. We just played here yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. We play here every day, waiting for our families to come get us. They told us to wait here because everyone was sick. But we feel better now. We're ready to go home." My heart broke. They didn't know. They had no idea they'd died. "Mary, I need to tell you something important," but she'd already turned away. "Come on, everyone. Let's play again. Ring around the rosy." The 5 children joined hands and started their game again, singing that awful song, asterisk, ring around the rosy, asterisk, asterisk, pocket full of posies, asterisk, asterisk, ashes, ashes, asterisk, asterisk, we all fall down, asterisk. When they said fall down, they all collapsed to the ground. But then something happened that made my blood run cold. They didn't get back up right away. They lay there, perfectly still, their eyes closed. For a moment, they looked exactly like what they were, dead children. Then they sat up, giggling, and started the game over again. They were reenacting their own deaths, over and over, without understanding what they were doing. I pulled out my camera and took several pictures, just to prove to myself this was real. When I got the film developed the next day, every single photo showed the 5 ghost children, but it also showed something else, shadowy figures in the background. Dozens of them. Small figures, child-sized, standing among the trees. 23 children had died by Bloodroot Creek. We'd only seen 5 of them so far. Margaret and I met with Dr. Howard, a child psychologist from Asheville who'd treated 2 of the sick children. He sat in Margaret's office, looking at the photographs with a mixture of disbelief and scientific curiosity. "The children's symptoms are identical to Spanish flu," he said. "High fever, body aches, respiratory distress. But we've tested them for every illness we can think of. The tests come back normal. It's like they're experiencing psychosomatic symptoms triggered by, what, a mass hallucination? It's not a hallucination, I said firmly. The ghost children are real, and they're making the living children sick because they want companions. They're lonely. They've been trapped here for 50 years, waiting for their families, and they don't understand that they're dead. Doctor, Howard studied the photographs again. Assuming this is real, and I'm not saying I believe it is, what do you propose we do? I need to help them understand. I need to help them move on. How? I was a teacher. I spent 5 years explaining difficult concepts to children. Death is just another concept. Maybe, if I can make them understand, gently, like I would with any child, they'll be able to let go. Margaret touched my arm. Kat, you can't go back there alone. What if they try to make you sick too? They only seem to affect children. I'll be fine. But I wasn't sure about that at all. I went back to Bloodroot Creek that afternoon, armed with nothing but my teaching experience and a hope that I could reach 5 confused, lonely spirits who'd been children just like the ones I'd taught. They were waiting for me. All 5 of them, plus others now visible in the background, more ghost children watching from the trees. The other 18 who died here. Mary, I called, can we talk? She skipped over to me. Do you want to play Ring Around the Rosie? It's our favorite game. Mary, I know why it's your favorite. You played it when you were sick, didn't you? Back in 1918, when everyone had the flu. Her smile flickered. We were all sick. Everyone was sick. Mommy and Daddy said we had to stay strong and play together, keep our spirits up, so we played our game every day. And then what happened? Then, she looked confused. Then we kept playing. We've been playing ever since, waiting for Mommy and Daddy to come get us. I knelt down so I was at her eye level. Mary, honey, I need you to remember something important. After you were sick, do you remember feeling very tired? Do you remember going to sleep and not waking up? Her face crumpled. I don't want to remember that part. I know it's hard, but it's important. You fell asleep, didn't you? All of you did. And you didn't wake up. Emma, the other ghost girl, came closer. We did wake up. We're awake right now. No, sweetie, you didn't wake up. Not the way you think. You died. All of you died from the flu. And your families, they died too. Almost everyone in your community died. They buried you here by the creek in a little cemetery. All 5 children stared at me. The playfulness vanished from their faces. That's not true, Thomas said, his voice shaking. We're not dead. We can't be dead. We're playing. Dead people don't play. Sometimes they do, I said gently. Sometimes, when people die suddenly, or when they're very young, they get confused. They don't understand what happened. They keep doing what they were doing before, waiting for things to go back to normal. But sweetie, things can't go back to normal. You've been waiting here for 51 years. Sarah, one of the twins, started to cry. I want my mommy. I know you do. I know, but your mommy isn't coming, honey. She's gone too. Everyone you knew is gone. It's 1969 now. The world has changed. But you're still here, stuck in 1918, playing the same game over and over. We're keeping our spirits up, Samuel whispered. Like Mommy said. You did a wonderful job. You were so brave. But you don't have to keep your spirits up anymore. You don't have to wait anymore. It's okay to rest now. Mary looked at me with those distant eyes, and for the first time, they seemed to focus. Really focus. We're ghosts? Yes, sweetie. You're ghosts. And we made the other children sick? The new children who came to play with us? You didn't mean to. You were just so happy to have friends again. But yes, you made them sick because you were trying to bring them into your world. The world where you exist. All 5 children looked at each other. Then, slowly, the other 18 ghost children emerged from the trees. 23 spirits, all children, all confused and scared and lonely. One of the older boys, maybe 11, spoke up. What do we do now? Now, I said, fighting back tears. We help you move on. We help you find your families. They're waiting for you. They've been waiting a long time. How do we do that? Mary asked. We're going to play one more game. Ring Around the Rosie. But this time, when we fall down, you're going to let yourselves really fall. You're going to let yourselves go. And you're going to wake up somewhere else, somewhere better, where your families are waiting. Will it hurt? Emma asked. No, baby, it won't hurt. I promise. The 23 ghost children formed a circle. They held hands, some solid, some translucent, all of them scared. I stood in the center. I'll start the song, I said. And when I do, I want you to remember your families. Remember how much they loved you. Remember that they're waiting for you. Can you do that? They nodded. I began to sing, my voice shaky but clear. Asterisk. Ring around the rosy. Asterisk, asterisk, pocket full of posies. Asterisk, asterisk. Ashes, asterisk. Asterisk, we all fall down. Asterisk. The children sang with me, their voices growing stronger. As they sang, they started to glow. Soft light, like moonlight, emanating from each small figure. When we reached, we all fall down, they collapsed to the ground. But this time, they didn't get back up. This time, the light around them grew brighter and brighter until I had to shield my eyes. When I opened them again, the children were gone. The cemetery was just a cemetery now. Quiet, peaceful, empty. I sat down among the forgotten graves and cried. 2 days later, all the sick children recovered. Their fevers broke overnight, and they woke up feeling fine, with no memory of their friends by the creek. I organized a proper memorial service with Margaret's help. We cleared the overgrown cemetery and placed a marker there, in memory of the children of Bloodroot Creek, taken by the influenza pandemic of 1918. We invited the whole community. Dozens of people came, some of them descendants of the families who'd lived here decades ago. We read the names of all 23 children. We planted wildflowers around the graves. The bloodroot flowers stopped blooming in circles. They went back to their natural scattered pattern. I didn't see the ghost children again, but sometimes, when I lead school groups past the cemetery, I hear children's laughter in the distance. Not sad or lonely or desperate. Just happy. Playing. Margaret created an educational program about the 1918 flu pandemic, teaching local schools about that terrible time in history and the children who died. We made sure their names and their stories wouldn't be forgotten again. The creek area was designated as a memorial wildflower preserve. No more field trips there, just quiet remembrance. As for me, I learned something important that spring. Ghosts aren't always evil or vengeful. Sometimes, they're just confused. Sometimes they're just children who don't understand what happened to them. Sometimes they just need someone to explain, gently and kindly, that it's okay to let go. I still carry my wildflower identification book on every hike. But now, I also carry a small photo in my wallet, one of the pictures I took that day by the creek. 23 ghost children, playing in the forest, waiting for someone to finally help them understand. They're at rest now, but I'll never forget the lesson they taught me. That every spirit, even the scary ones, deserves compassion and understanding. That sometimes, the most frightening things are just sad things that nobody took the time to understand. Every spring, when the bloodroot blooms, I visit that little cemetery. I make sure the memorial marker is clean and the wildflowers are thriving. And sometimes, just for a moment, I think I see children playing among the trees. But they're not trapped anymore. They're not waiting. They're just children, the way children should be, free and happy and finally at peace. I'm still a ranger, still leading field trips, still teaching kids about the forest. But now I also teach them about the children of Bloodroot Creek, about remembering the past and honoring those who came before. Because the scariest thing isn't ghosts, the scariest thing is forgetting, and we won't forget them anymore. My name is Catherine Ashwood, and this is my story. Every word of it is true. My name is James Copperhead, and I've been a ranger in the George Washington National Forest for 14 years. People always laugh at my last name, says it fits, working in these Virginia mountains where copperheads and timber rattlers hide under every rock. I tell them it's just coincidence. But sometimes I wonder. I'm 43, got a geology degree from Virginia Tech, and I know these Blue Ridge Mountains like the back of my weathered hands. My wife Sarah runs the little library in town, and our twin boys just turned 16. They think their old man's job is boring, checking trails, taking rock samples, making sure hikers don't get lost or killed. Most days, they're right, but not today. It started with my radio crackling to life at dawn. Dr. Patricia Williams from the university seismology department sounded worried. "James, we're picking up some strange readings from your area. Serpentine Ridge, specifically. You know anything about regular vibrations up there?" I adjusted my geological hammer on my belt and pulled out the topographic map. Serpentine Ridge was about 3 miles northeast, a strange formation of green serpentine rock that twisted along the mountain like a sleeping snake. The Cherokee who lived here before us had stories about it, but I never paid much attention to old legends. "What kind of vibrations?" I asked, already heading for my truck. "That's just it. They're too regular. Like breathing. Every 47 seconds we get a seismic pulse from underground. Been going on for 3 days now. I'd been working these mountains long enough to know that rocks don't breathe. But I also knew that Dr. Williams didn't call unless something was seriously wrong. The drive to Serpentine Ridge took me through thick pine forest, past streams still running high from the unusually warm winter we'd been having. Snow was melting weeks early, and the whole forest felt restless. Animals were acting strange too. I'd seen 3 black bears in the past week, all moving downhill fast, like they were running from something. When I reached the base of the ridge, I could feel it before I could see it. A low rumble in the ground, so deep it was more felt than heard. My truck's radio started crackling with static. I parked and grabbed my gear, seismic reader, rock samples kit, cave rescue equipment. The trail up to the ridge was steeper than I remembered, winding through formations of that strange green serpentine rock that gave the place its name. The stone looked almost alive in the morning light, with veins and patterns that reminded me uncomfortably of scales. Halfway up, I stopped. Something was wrong with the trail. I'd hiked this path hundreds of times. I knew every route, every rock, every turn. But the serpentine formations had changed. What used to be separate boulder clusters were now connected, forming long, curving walls that followed the ridgeline. It looked like someone had rearranged tons of stone overnight. That's when I felt the breathing. The ground beneath my boots pulsed gently, rhythmically. 47 seconds apart, just like Dr. Williams said. I knelt and pressed my hand to the earth. The vibration wasn't random seismic activity. It was too steady, too organic. It felt like I was kneeling on the chest of something enormous, something alive. I pulled out my radio but got only static. The electromagnetic interference was getting stronger the higher I climbed. My seismic reader was going crazy, showing movement patterns that made no geological sense. According to the readings, something the size of a mountain was slowly shifting position underground. The smell hit me near the top of the ridge, musty and ancient, like the shed skin of some massive snake. I'd found plenty of snake skins in these woods, but nothing like this. This smell was bigger, older, and it made my skin crawl. At the summit, I found the impossible. Carved into the solid serpentine rock was a track. Not a footprint or tire mark. A track like a gigantic snake had slithered across the stone, leaving deep grooves and what looked like scale impressions in rock that should have been too hard to mark. The track was 3 feet wide and led along the ridge toward a cave opening I'd never seen before. The entrance was perfectly round, about 8 feet across, and disappeared into darkness that seemed to swallow my flashlight beam. That's when I knew Dr. Williams was right to be worried. And I was starting to think my Cherokee grandmother's stories might not have been just legends after all. I called Dr. Maria Strongeagle from my satellite phone. She was the only person I knew who understood both geology and Cherokee culture. If anyone could make sense of what I was seeing, it would be her. "James, slow down," Maria said when I finished describing the track. "You're saying the serpentine formations actually moved? I'm saying they're in completely different positions than they were last week. And there's a cave here that wasn't here before." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm coming up. Don't go in that cave alone." While I waited, I took photographs and collected rock samples. The serpentine stone felt warm to the touch, even though the morning air was cold. When I pressed my ear to the rock, I could hear something like a heartbeat, deep and slow. The breathing rhythm was getting stronger. Every 47 seconds, the whole ridge would pulse slightly. It was so gentle that someone not looking for it might miss it. But once you felt it, you couldn't ignore it. Maria arrived 2 hours later, breathing hard from the climb. She was my age, with graying black hair and the kind of steady eyes that came from years of looking at rocks and understanding what they meant. But when she saw the track, her face went pale. "My grandmother told me stories," she said quietly, "about the great serpent that sleeps in the backbone of the mountains. She said it was responsible for creating the Appalachian Ridge, and that it still controlled the earthquakes and tremors that shake the earth." "You don't believe that," I said. I didn't. "But look at this." She knelt beside the track and pointed to symbols carved into the rock nearby. "These are Cherokee petroglyphs, old ones. They're warnings." The symbols showed a massive snake coiled around mountain peaks. Other carvings depicted people offering gifts to the serpent and scenes of earthquakes destroying villages. "The stories say the serpent sleeps most of the time," Maria continued. "But when it stirs, the earth shakes. When it wakes fully." She gestured at a petroglyph showing mountains crumbling. Everything falls down. A pulse went through the ground beneath us, stronger than before. My seismic reader beeped frantically. "It's getting worse," I said. "Doctor, Williams thinks there might be a major earthquake coming." Maria stood and looked toward the cave entrance. "The stories also say that when the serpent begins to wake, someone has to speak with it. Someone has to convince it to keep sleeping. That's just mythology." She pointed at the impossible track in solid stone. "You sure about that?" We approached the cave entrance together. My flashlight beam barely penetrated the darkness inside. The musty snakeskin smell was stronger here, and I could hear something moving in the depths, a slow, sliding sound like scales against stone. "There's definitely something alive down there," I whispered. That's when the cave entrance began to glow. A faint green light, the same color as the serpentine rock, emanated from somewhere deep underground. The light pulsed in rhythm with the breathing, growing brighter and dimmer every 47 seconds. "James," Maria grabbed my arm, "look at the walls." The serpentine rock around the cave entrance was changing. The stone was flowing, like water, reshaping itself into more detailed scale patterns. As we watched, the circular opening stretched and narrowed, taking on the shape of a massive eye, an eye that was slowly opening. The eye was easily 10 feet across, with a vertical pupil that reflected our flashlight beams back at us. The iris was deep green with flecks of gold, and it moved, tracking our position as we stood frozen at the edge of the ridge. "It sees us," Maria whispered. The great eye blinked, a movement of stone that should have been impossible. When it opened again, the pupil had contracted, focusing on me specifically. I felt a presence in my mind, ancient and vast, touching my thoughts with careful curiosity. Images flashed through my consciousness. Visions of the mountains forming millions of years ago, of ice ages and volcanic eruptions, of Cherokee tribes learning to read the earth's moods and work with the forces that shape the land. I saw myself through the serpent's perception, a tiny figure on the surface of something unimaginably large. Then the contact broke, leaving me gasping. The eye closed, and the cave entrance returned to its simple circular shape. But the message was clear. Something immense and ancient was waking up beneath Serpentine Ridge, and it knew we were there. My radio crackled to life with Dr. Williams' panicked voice. "James, get away from there." The seismic activity just jumped off the charts. We're reading movement that could trigger a magnitude 7 earthquake within hours. I looked at Maria. She nodded grimly. "It's not just waking up," she said. "It's angry." The earthquake hit at sunset. "Not the big one, Doctor," Williams predicted, but a warning tremor that sent rocks tumbling down the mountainsides and cracked windows in town. I felt it coming through the ground 30 seconds before it struck. The serpent's breathing rhythm changed, becoming faster and more agitated. Maria and I had spent the day studying the petroglyphs and trying to understand what the Cherokee stories really meant. According to the old legends, the Great Serpent wasn't just some monster sleeping underground. It was the force that held the mountains together, that controlled the pressure building up along fault lines throughout the Appalachians. "It's like a safety valve," Maria explained, as we sat by my campfire, watching the stars appear through the smoke. When pressure builds up too much in one place, the serpent shifts position to release it gradually. Small tremors instead of devastating earthquakes. "So why is it angry now?" She pointed toward the distant lights of the mining operation on the next ridge over. "Mining? Drilling? Explosions going off underground every day for the past 3 months. They're blasting right through the serpent's domain. I thought about all the industrial activity that had been expanding into these mountains recently. Mountaintop removal, natural gas drilling, massive construction projects. If there really was something ancient and powerful sleeping beneath the ridges, we'd been hitting it with dynamite and bulldozers for decades. How do we talk to it? I asked. According to my grandmother's stories, you have to go deep, into the heart of the mountain. But James, she stared into the fire. The stories also say that most people who tried never came back. That night, I dreamed of scales the size of highway lanes and eyes like green suns burning in the darkness. I dreamed of speaking with a voice that had been silent since before humans walked the earth, and of carrying messages between the surface world and the depths. I woke to my satellite phone ringing. "Doctor," William sounded terrified. "James, you need to evacuate the area immediately. We've got seismic readings showing massive underground movement. The whole ridge system is destabilizing." Through my tent walls, I could see green light pulsing from the direction of life, the cave. The breathing rhythm had changed again, now every 30 seconds, and getting faster. "How long do we have?" I asked. "Maybe hours, maybe less. Something down there is about to break free, and when it does, it's going to reshape the entire mountain range." I found Maria already awake, packing her gear. "It's not breaking free," she said. "It's trying to stabilize the system, but something's fighting it. The mining operations are still blasting. They're scheduled for another round of explosions at dawn. Can we stop them? Not from here. Radio communications are completely scrambled. The electromagnetic interference is getting stronger by the hour. I made a decision that Sarah would probably divorce me for, if I lived long enough to tell her about it. I'm going into the cave." "James, no, it's too dangerous." "Look around, Maria. The whole mountain is shaking itself apart. If the serpent is really trying to prevent a major earthquake, then maybe I can help. Maybe I can carry a message." She studied my face in the green light that was now pouring steadily from the cave entrance. "You really believe the stories now?" "I believe what I can see. And what I can see is that we're about to lose everything if someone doesn't try something desperate." We hiked to the cave entrance in the pre-dawn darkness. The serpentine rock formations had continued changing throughout the night, flowing into new configurations that looked more and more like anatomical features. Ribs, vertebrae, massive coils of muscle beneath the surface. The cave itself had grown larger, now easily 15 feet across. The green light came from deep inside, painting everything in an eerie glow that reminded me of being underwater. "The Cherokee who did this," I asked Maria, "what did they take with them?" "Offerings, tobacco, cornmeal, precious stones, things that showed respect for the spirit of the mountain." I emptied my pockets and found what I had: my geological hammer, some energy bars, and a small piece of serpentine rock I'd been carrying as a good luck charm. It wasn't much of an offering, but it would have to do. "If I don't come back," I told Maria, "tell Sarah and the boys that I love them, and tell Dr. Williams to redirect those mining operations away from this ridge system, whatever it takes." I entered the cave just as the first explosion echoed from the distant mining site. The tunnel sloped downward at a steep angle, following natural curves in the rock that looked increasingly organic the deeper I went. The walls pulsed with that rhythmic breathing, and I could feel a vast heartbeat through the soles of my boots. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the tunnel opened into an enormous cavern, and there, coiled in the green-lit darkness, was the great serpent of Cherokee legend. It was beautiful and terrible beyond description. Scales the size of car doors caught and reflected the ethereal light. Its body was so massive that I could only see portions of it, a curve here, a coil there, disappearing into passages that led deeper into the mountain's heart. And it was hurt. The serpent's head rose from the depths as I approached, and I found myself looking into eyes the size of garage doors. But these weren't the cold, predatory eyes of a snake. There was intelligence there, and pain, and something that might have been hope. "Asterisk. You came," asterisk, a voice said in my mind. Not words, but concepts and images that bypassed my ears entirely. Asterisk. The small ones remember the old agreements. Asterisk. I could see the serpent's injuries now, raw wounds along its flanks where mining explosions had torn through scale and flesh. disrupting the careful network of pressure points it used to control seismic activity throughout the mountain range. Asterisk. They hurt you, asterisk, I said, not sure if my thoughts would reach it. Asterisk. They know not what they do. The earth bones crack, where I cannot hold them. Soon, the great shaking will come, and many will die. Asterisk images flooded my mind. A catastrophic earthquake triggered by the mining operations, fault lines releasing centuries of built-up pressure all at once. I saw cities falling, dams bursting, millions of lives lost across the eastern seaboard. Asterisk, can you stop it? Asterisk, asterisk, I am too wounded. The harmony is broken. Unless the deep cutting stops and the wounds heal, I cannot maintain the balance. Asterisk, another explosion echoed from above, closer this time. The serpent's massive body shuddered, and I felt the mountain shake around us. Asterisk, but there is another way. Asterisk, the serpent continued. Asterisk, in the old times, your people and mine worked as one. A human voice to speak my warnings, human hands to tend the sacred places. The small ones who remember could learn again. Asterisk, I understood. The Cherokee had been earthquake predictors, working with the serpent to know when and where pressure was building, evacuating dangerous areas before the tremors hit. Asterisk, you want me to be your voice. Asterisk, asterisk, if you are willing. But know this, to speak for the mountain is to become part of it. You will feel every tremor, every shift in the deep places. You will know when the earth is troubled, and that knowledge will change you. Asterisk. I thought of Sarah and the boys, of Dr. Williams and her seismic equipment that couldn't predict earthquakes with nearly the accuracy this ancient being possessed. I thought of all the people who would die if the big one hit without warning. Asterisk, I'll do it. Asterisk, the serpent lowered its great head until it was level with mine. Asterisk, then received the gift of earth speech. Asterisk, it touched my forehead with the tip of its snout, and suddenly I could feel everything, every fault line for hundreds of miles, every point of stress and pressure in the bedrock, every place where the earth was preparing to shift. The sensation was overwhelming, like trying to hear 1,000 conversations at once, but, gradually, patterns emerged. I could sense the immediate danger, a section of ridge about to collapse where the miners were working. I could feel the serpent's pain as explosions continued to tear through its flesh, and I could sense the greater catastrophe building, a massive release of pressure that would happen within hours unless something changed. Asterisk, tell them, asterisk, the serpent said. Asterisk, tell them where the danger lies and how to work with the mountain instead of against it. Help me heal, and I will keep the great shaking from coming. The asterisk, I ran back through the tunnel, my new sensitivity making every step an adventure in sensory overload. I could feel Maria's footsteps on the ridge above, could sense the stress fractures forming in the rock where the miners were preparing their next blast. I burst from the cave to find Maria frantically working her radio, trying to reach the outside world through the electromagnetic interference. The miners, I gasped. They're about to blast right through a major fault line. If they detonate those charges, the whole ridge system will collapse. I can't get through. The interference is too strong. I closed my eyes and felt for the source of the electromagnetic disturbance. The serpent's nervous system ran through the mountains like electrical cables, and its agitation was scrambling all radio signals. Asterisk, help me calm it. Asterisk, I thought, and felt the serpent's attention focus on me. Working together, we managed to reduce the interference enough for Maria's radio to crackle to life. She immediately started calling the mining company, the Forest Service, anyone who would listen. Evacuation order, she shouted into the radio. Immediate geological hazard on Ridge 7. All personnel evacuate immediately. Below us, I could see the mining trucks starting to move. But the blast charges were already set, and the automated detonation sequence was counting down. I felt the serpent gathering its strength, preparing to absorb as much of the explosion's impact as possible to prevent a catastrophic chain reaction. But it was already wounded and weakened. The effort might kill it. Asterisk, there has to be another way. Asterisk, I thought desperately. And then I remembered my geological training. Controlled explosions to redirect seismic energy. If we could set off smaller charges in precise locations, we might be able to channel the blast's force away from the fault lines. I grabbed Maria's radio. Dr. Williams, are you listening? James, thank God, We're reading massive instability in your area. I need you to contact the mining company. Tell them to detonate charges in sequence, not all at once. Start with the eastern section, then work west in 30-second intervals. It'll redirect the pressure wave away from the main fault. How could you possibly know that? I looked back toward the cave, where green light still pulsed in rhythm with the serpent's breathing. Trust me, the controlled detonation worked. Instead of one massive explosion that would have shattered the fault lines, the sequential blasts created a series of smaller pressure waves that the serpent was able to absorb and redirect harmlessly into the deeper bedrock. I felt every explosion through my new connection to the mountain, but instead of pain, there was relief. The dangerous pressure that had been building for months was finally being released safely. Over the following days, I worked with Dr. Williams and the mining company to establish new protocols. Using my strange new ability to sense stress points in the bedrock, we identified safe zones for industrial activity and dangerous areas that needed to be left alone. The serpent's wounds began to heal. The regular breathing pattern returned to its normal 47-second rhythm, and the electromagnetic interference faded enough for normal communications to resume. Maria helped me understand the cultural significance of what had happened. According to Cherokee tradition, I had become what they called an earth speaker, someone who could communicate between the human world and the spiritual forces that controlled natural phenomena. My grandmother said there used to be several earth speakers in every generation, Maria told me as we watched the sunset from Serpentine Ridge. They died out when the old ways were forgotten. You might be the first one in over a century. The ability came with a price. I could feel every earthquake for hundreds of miles, every landslide and rockfall. Sometimes the sensations were so overwhelming that I had to take medication just to sleep. But I also prevented disasters. In the months that followed, my warnings helped evacuate areas before several major tremors, saving dozens of lives. Sarah wasn't thrilled about her husband becoming some kind of geological mystic, but she adapted. The boys thought it was the coolest thing ever, and they started learning about Cherokee culture and geology with new enthusiasm. Dr. Williams established a formal partnership between the university and the Forest Service, using my abilities to supplement their seismic equipment. We developed an early warning system that was more accurate than anything in the scientific literature. The mining company initially resisted the new restrictions, but after their insurance costs dropped by 60% due to reduced geological hazards, they became enthusiastic supporters of the program. I still go back to the cave sometimes, to check on the serpent and to learn more about the deep forces that shape our world. It's teaching me about connections I never imagined, how underground rivers affect fault stability, how the moon's gravity influences earthquake timing, how the mountains themselves are alive in ways that geology textbooks never mention. My Cherokee grandmother used to say that the earth remembers everything. Now I understand what she meant. Through the serpent, I can sense the geological history embedded in every rock layer, the ancient seas and ice ages and volcanic eruptions that shaped these mountains over millions of years. But I also sense the future, the stress building up in distant fault lines, the slow movements that will reshape the landscape over the coming centuries. The serpent is patient and long-lived, thinking in geological timescales that make human history seem like a brief flicker. Sometimes, late at night when the mountain is especially quiet, I can feel its dreams. It dreams of the perfect balance between stability and change, of humans who understand their place in the larger patterns of earth and sky. It dreams of a time when people will work with the mountains instead of against them. I'm doing my part to make those dreams real. Every time I prevent an earthquake or help redirect dangerous development away from unstable areas, I'm honoring the ancient agreement between humans and the forces that shape our world. The serpent still sleeps beneath Serpentine Ridge, but it's no longer alone. And as long as there are people willing to listen to the earth's voice and speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, the mountains will remember, and the great shaking will hold off for another day. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the cave pool and notice that my eyes have changed. They're still brown, but now they have flecks of green that seem to glow in certain light. Sarah says I'm imagining it, but the boys have started showing the same change. The earth-speaking gift, it seems, runs in families, and Serpentine Ridge continues to breathe, 47 seconds apart, steady as a heartbeat, keeping time with the pulse of the living mountain. My name is Samuel Moonwater, and I've spent 11 years watching over these mountains at night. People think it's a lonely job, being a park ranger in the Nantahala National Forest, but I never minded the darkness. My Cherokee grandmother used to say I had night eyes, that I could see things other people missed when the sun went down. I'm 37 now, tall and skinny with black hair that started going silver at the temples. My wife Sarah used to tease me about it, said I looked like a movie star. She died 2 years ago in a car accident on Highway 19. Cancer would have been easier somehow, at least you get time to say goodbye. After she passed, I started spending even more time on night patrol. The stars helped. I'd bring my telescope and my charts, losing myself in constellations while the rest of the world slept. The Nantahala Gorge is the deepest valley in these mountains. The name means land of the noonday sun in Cherokee, because the gorge is so deep that sunlight only reaches the bottom at midday. At night, it gets darker here than almost anywhere else in North Carolina. Perfect for stargazing. Perfect for things that don't like the light. I never believed my grandmother's stories about the moon-eyed people. She'd tell them on winter nights, warming her hands by the fire, her voice dropping to a whisper. Ancient people who lived here before the Cherokee came. Pale as ghosts, she said. Eyes huge and round like owls. They feared the sun so much they lived underground, only coming out when the moon was dark. Fairy tales, I'd say, and she'd just smile that knowing smile. That was before the summer of 1976. Before the phone calls started coming in. It was June 15th when I got the first report. The new moon had just passed the darkest nights of the month. A family camping near Mooney Falls called the ranger station, voices shaky and uncertain. They'd seen people near the cave openings, pale people, watching them from the shadows. Probably just other campers, I told them over the radio. Maybe they had flashlights? No lights, the father insisted. They just stood there, staring. Their eyes caught our campfire light and reflected it back, like animals. But they were standing upright, walking on 2 legs. I drove out there anyway. That's my job. I brought my regular gear flashlight, first aid kit, my old night vision scope from my army days. The camping family had already packed up and left by the time I arrived, but their fire was still smoldering. The cave entrance was about 50 yards from their campsite. Just a dark opening in the limestone cliff face, maybe 6 feet high. I'd explored it once during the day. It went back about 20 feet and then narrowed too much for a person to get through. Nothing special. But that night, standing there in the darkness, something felt wrong. The air coming from the cave was cool, like always, but it carried a sweet smell. Not unpleasant, exactly. Like minerals mixed with something floral. Underground flowers, if such things existed. And there was a faint blue glow deep inside the opening, so dim I almost thought I was imagining it. I clicked on my flashlight and approached the entrance. "Park Ranger," I called out. "Anyone in there?" My voice echoed back at me, and then kept echoing. The sound bounced around in a way that made no sense for such a shallow cave. It overlapped itself, creating a weird chorus of my own voice calling out from different directions. I stepped inside, sweeping my flashlight across the walls. The pale stone caught the light and threw it back, making everything glow. And that's when I saw them. Handprints. Dozens of them, pressed against the cave walls. But these weren't like normal handprints. The fingers were too long, too thin. And the palms were huge. Each handprint was easily twice the size of mine, and I'm not a small man. They looked old, faded into the stone itself. But some of them were still visible in a way that made my skin crawl. They formed patterns, circles, and lines that reminded me of my star charts. Constellations mapped on the cave walls. I pulled out my camera and took pictures. The flash went off, filling the cave with light for just a second. Something moved in the back of the cave. I froze, my heart suddenly pounding. "Who's there?" No answer. But I'd seen it. I was sure I'd seen it. A shape pulling back into the darkness where the cave narrowed. Something pale and quick. I aimed my flashlight at the narrow opening in the back wall. The beam couldn't reach far enough to show me what was there. But I could feel eyes on me. Watching. Waiting. The sweet mineral smell got stronger. The blue glow seemed to pulse once, twice, then faded completely. I backed out of the cave slowly, never turning away from that dark opening. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. Asterisk. They lived underground. They feared the sun. They only came out when the moon was dark. Asterisk. Once I was outside, I radioed the main station. Hey, it's Moonwater. I need you to pull any reports we have about the caves near Mooney Falls. Anything unusual in the past few years. Static crackled. Then, what kind of unusual? I looked back at the cave entrance, that dark mouth and the cliff face. People? I said. Reports about people in the caves. The next morning, I drove to Cherokee to see Robert Swimmer. He's a tribal historian, teaches at the Cultural Center, and he's been my friend since we were kids. If anyone knew more about the Moon-Eyed People legends, it would be Robert. I found him in his office, surrounded by books and old photographs. He looked up when I knocked, his round face breaking into a smile. Sam! Haven't seen you in months. Still talking to the stars instead of people? I need to ask you about the old stories, I said. The Moon-Eyed People. His smile faded. Why? I told him about the handprints, the strange echoes, that feeling of being watched. I showed him the photos I'd taken. He studied them for a long time, his expression growing more serious. My grandmother used to say they were real, he finally said. Not metaphors, not legends. Real people who lived here before we did. The Cherokee drove them out when we came to these mountains, pushed them deeper underground. Most people think they just died out or moved away. But some of the old ones, he paused. Some of the old ones said they never left, just went deeper. Waiting. Waiting for what? For the light to leave. He handed the photos back to me. Be careful, Sam. If they're still here, they've been hiding for a very long time. They won't want to be found. I drove back to Nantahala that afternoon. On the way, I stopped at 3 other caves in the gorge area. At each one, I found the same things. Handprints on the walls, that sweet mineral smell, and a faint blue glow deep inside. But at the 3rd cave, I found something else. Footprints. They started at the cave entrance and led through the soft mud near a creek, then disappeared into the forest. But these weren't normal footprints. They glowed. Actually glowed in the dim light under the trees, leaving faint blue-green trails like some kind of phosphorescent paint. I followed them for about 100 yards. They led from one cave entrance to another, crossing the creek and winding through the thickest part of the forest. Whoever or whatever made these prints was traveling between caves, using paths that normal hikers never took. The prints were fresh, maybe only hours old. I was crouching down to examine one more closely when I heard the sound. A soft clicking noise, like stones tapping together. It came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the trees in that same strange way my voice had echoed in the cave. I stood up slowly, my hand moving to the radio on my belt. That's when I saw the eyes. 2 huge, round eyes, catching the afternoon sunlight filtering through the trees. They were maybe 30 feet away, partially hidden behind a thick oak tree. The eyes didn't blink. They just stared at me, unmoving, reflecting the light like a cat's eyes, but much, much larger. Hello? I called out. The eyes disappeared, just vanished, as if someone had flicked off a switch. I heard movement quick and almost silent heading deeper into the forest. I tried to follow, but the trail went cold. The phosphorescent footprints ended at a rocky outcrop, and I couldn't find any sign of where the person had gone. It was like they'd just melted into the stone. I radioed the main station again. I need to talk to whoever handles archaeological stuff. Got some cave art and artifacts that might be important. They connected me with Dr. Lisa Chen, an anthropologist from the University of North Carolina, who sometimes consulted for the Park Service. I explained what I'd found, trying to sound professional and not crazy. Pre-Cherokee artifacts? Her voice crackled with interest over the phone line. In sealed caves? I can be there tomorrow morning. Don't let anyone else into those caves until I've seen them. That night, I set up my telescope near the Mooney Falls campsite. I told myself I was just doing my job, keeping an eye on the area. But really, I wanted to see if they'd come back. The new moon period was almost over. Tomorrow night there would be a sliver of moon visible. But tonight was still completely dark. Perfect conditions for whatever those things were. I waited. Around midnight, the clicking sound started again. soft at first, then louder. They came from multiple directions, surrounding my position. The sweet mineral smell drifted through the air. I grabbed my night vision scope and scanned the tree line. There, not one but 5 of them, standing at the edge of the forest, watching me. Through the green glow of the night vision, I could see their pale skin, almost white. They were tall, maybe 6.5 feet, and thin, with long arms and legs. Their heads were larger than normal, and those enormous eyes dominated their faces. They wore simple clothes made from some kind of woven material I couldn't identify, and they just stood there, perfectly still, staring at me. One of them raised its hand, those long, thin fingers spreading wide. It wasn't threatening. It looked almost like a greeting. I lowered the night vision scope and raised my own hand slowly, mimicking the gesture. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as one, they turned and walked back into the forest. Not running, not hiding, just leaving, as if they'd seen what they came to see. I sat there for a long time after they left, my heart racing, my hands shaking. My grandmother had been right. The moon-eyed people were real. They'd been here all along, living in the darkness beneath our feet, and now they knew I'd seen them. Dr. Chen arrived early the next morning with 2 graduate students and enough equipment to fill a small truck. She was a small woman with short black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. The moment she saw my photos of the handprints, she went very still. "Do you know what this is?" she asked quietly. "Old? Ancient." She traced one of the handprints with her finger, careful not to touch it. "These markings, they match some petroglyphs we've found in other parts of Appalachia. We've always assumed they were made by pre-Cherokee civilizations, but we've never found anything this well preserved." She looked up at me. "And you say there are multiple cave sites?" I took her to all 4 caves I'd documented. At each one, she and her students took measurements, photographs, and samples. They found more than just handprints. There were tools carved from bone, so old they'd started to mineralize, strange pottery fragments. And in one cave, carved deep into the stone floor, a perfect map of the night sky as it would have appeared 2,000 years ago. "This changes everything," Dr. Chen said, kneeling beside the star map. "This level of astronomical knowledge, whoever made this understood celestial mechanics at a level that shouldn't have been possible for prehistoric people." "They're not prehistoric," I said. She looked at me. "What?" "They're still here. I've seen them." I expected her to laugh or tell me I was crazy. Instead, she nodded slowly. "The legends talk about a people who couldn't tolerate sunlight, photosensitivity. It's a real medical condition. People with extreme cases have to avoid all UV exposure or they'll get terrible burns and eye damage. If an entire population had that condition, they'd live underground," I finished. "Only coming out at night." "Only coming out during the darkest nights," she corrected. "Even moonlight might be too bright for severe cases." That evening, as we were packing up equipment, one of the graduate students, a nervous kid named Jake, came running from the direction of the 3rd cave. His face was white, and he was breathing hard. "There's someone in there," he gasped. "I went back to get the light meter. I forgot, and there's someone in the back of the cave. Just standing there, staring." We all rushed over. I went in first, flashlight ready. The cave was empty. "It was there," Jake insisted. "Tall, really pale, with huge eyes. It was just standing in the narrow part, watching me. When I turned on my flashlight, it made this clicking sound and backed away into the darkness." Dr. Chen examined the narrow opening at the back of the cave. She pulled out a measuring tape. "This opening is only about 8 inches wide. No one could fit through here." "Unless there's a bigger passage behind it," I said. "I'd been thinking about this since yesterday. These caves might connect to a larger system underground. That's why my ground-up voice echoed so strangely. That's how they're moving between caves so quickly." "The Nantahala area is full of limestone," Dr. Chen said slowly. "Limestone means caves, big cave systems." She looked at me. "If you're right, there could be miles of passages down there, a whole hidden world." That night, I camped alone near the Mooney Falls site again. Dr. Chen and her students had gone back to their hotel, but I couldn't leave. Something was building. I could feel it in the air, in the way the forest had gone quiet around me. The moon was a thin crescent now, barely giving any light, still dark enough for them. They came earlier this time. I saw them at dusk, just as the last sunlight was fading from the gorge. One stood at the cave entrance, watching me set up my tent. When I looked directly at it, it didn't hide. It just stood there, those massive eyes fixed on me. I grabbed my telescope and turned it toward the cave. Through the lens, I could see details I'd missed before. Its skin wasn't just pale, it had a faint bluish tint, like skim milk. Its eyes had no visible pupils, just large dark circles that seemed to catch and hold what little light there was. Its clothes were woven from something that looked like plant fibers, decorated with patterns that matched the star maps in the caves. Around its neck, it wore a necklace made of small bones and stones, and hanging from the center of the necklace was a piece of rock crystal, carved into the shape of a crescent moon. I lowered the telescope. The figure tilted its head, like a bird studying something interesting. Then it gestured, those long fingers pointing at my telescope, then up at the sky, then back at itself. It was asking me something. About the telescope, about the stars. My grandmother's voice came back to me. Asterisk. They understood the sky. They read the stars, like we read books. The asterisk. I grabbed my star chart and walked slowly toward the cave entrance, holding the chart up so it could see. The figure watched me approach. When I was about 10 feet away, I stopped and knelt down, spreading the chart on the ground. Stars, I said, pointing at the chart, then up at the sky. I study stars too. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the figure stepped forward into the last of the dying light. Up close, I could see it was ancient, its face lined with age, its movements careful and deliberate. But those eyes were bright and aware. It knelt across from me, studying my star chart. One long finger reached out, touching a constellation I'd marked, Orion. Then it pointed at the ground, at the caves, and made a gesture that seemed to say, asterisk, we have this too. Underground, asterisk, you have star maps, I said, in your caves. It nodded, actually nodded, a gesture I wouldn't have expected it to know. Then it stood, gesturing for me to follow. Every instinct told me this was dangerous, but something else, maybe my grandmother's blood, maybe just curiosity, made me stand up and follow it into the cave. The blue glow was stronger tonight. It came from patches of lichen growing on the cave walls, phosphorescent fungus that provided just enough light to see by. The figure moved confidently through the darkness, its eyes clearly designed for this environment. At the back of the cave, it stopped at the narrow opening. Up close, I could see that the opening wasn't as narrow as I'd thought. The shadows had hidden its true size. It was just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The figure looked at me, then at the opening. An invitation. How far does it go? I asked. It held up both hands, fingers spread wide. 10. Then again. 20. Then it gestured broadly, sweeping its arms to encompass something vast. Miles. The cave system went for miles. I thought about Dr. Chen's words. Asterisk, a whole hidden world. Asterisk, I'll come back, I said. Tomorrow, I'll bring people who want to understand, who want to help. The figure tilted its head again, considering. Then it reached up and removed the crystal moon pendant from around its neck. It held it out to me. I took it carefully. The crystal was warm from its body heat, proof that whatever these beings were, they were alive, real. The figure touched its chest, then pointed at me. A connection, an understanding. Then it slipped through the narrow opening and disappeared into the darkness beyond. I barely slept that night. When Dr. Chen arrived the next morning with her team, I showed her the crystal pendant and told her everything. She held the pendant up to the light, examining it closely. This is hand-carved. Look at the detail on this moon shape, it's perfect. And this stone, she pulled out a magnifying glass. This is quartz crystal. The Cherokee used quartz in ceremonies, but they usually didn't carve it like this. This technique is older. They want to show us their home. I said, the cave system. But we need to go today. Why today? I'd been thinking about this all night. Construction. The new highway project. They're planning to blast through the ridge above these caves on Monday, 3 days from now. If these passages are as extensive as I think they are, that blasting could collapse the whole system. Dr. Chen's face went pale. We have to stop it. If there's an archaeological site of this significance, it's more than that. I looked at her. There are people living down there. They've been here for thousands of years. If we don't protect their caves, we'll be destroying the last survivors of an ancient civilization." She was quiet for a moment. "You really believe they're still living down there? Not just remnants? Artifacts? I've talked to one of them. Last night, it gave me this." I held up the pendant. "They're not gone. They're hiding." Dr. Chen made some calls. She had connections with the State Archaeological Society, the Department of Transportation, National Park Service. While she worked on stopping the construction, I prepared to go back into the caves. Robert Swimmer showed up around noon. I'd called him that morning, told him what I'd found. "I'm coming with you," he said simply. "It could be dangerous. We don't know how they'll react to more people. My grandmother told me stories about these people my whole life." He set his jaw stubbornly. "If they're real, if they're still here, I need to see them." The Cherokee drove them underground. Maybe it's time we made peace with that. We went in at dusk, when the last light was fading. Dr. Chen and her students stayed outside with all the documentation we'd gathered, ready to fight the construction project. Robert and I carried flashlights, water, and my star charts. The blue glow in the caves was brighter tonight. As we squeezed through the narrow opening at the back, I realized why there were hundreds of the phosphorescent patches lighting the way. They'd been cultivated, I realized, arranged deliberately to create a path through the darkness. The passage opened up almost immediately into a larger tunnel. The walls were smooth, carved by water over millions of years, and every surface was covered with markings. Star charts, hundreds of them, thousands of years of astronomical observations carved into the living rock. "My God," Robert breathed. "Sam, do you know what this means?" I was about to answer when I heard the clicking sounds. They came from ahead of us, deeper in the tunnel. Multiple sources, creating that strange echoing effect. "They know we're here," I said. We moved forward carefully. The tunnel branched and rebranched, creating a maze that would have been impossible to navigate without the glowing lichen showing the way. The air was cool and damp, but still carried that sweet mineral smell. After what felt like miles, but was probably only a few hundred yards, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. I've never seen anything like it. The ceiling arched high above us, maybe 50 feet up, covered with more of the glowing fungus. It looked like the night sky, blue-green stars scattered across the darkness. And in the chamber below, a city. Not a big city. Maybe 100 small structures made from carved stone and woven materials. But it was clearly a settlement, clearly inhabited. I could see figures moving between the buildings, their pale forms glowing faintly in the blue light. "They're really here," Robert whispered. "After all this time, they're really here." The clicking sounds grew louder. Figures emerged from the structures, dozens of them. They surrounded us in a loose circle, not threatening but clearly cautious. Some carried tools that might have been weapons, sharp pieces of stone attached to wooden handles. The elderly figure from last night stepped forward. It made a gesture to the others, and they lowered their weapons. Then it approached us, moving slowly and deliberately. It pointed at the crystal pendant around my neck. I'd been wearing it since last night. Then it pointed at Robert, tilting its head in a question. "He's Cherokee," I said. "His people, our people, we share ancestors with you, from before the split." The figure studied Robert for a long moment. Then it reached out and touched his shoulder gently. Not aggressive, almost sad. Robert's voice cracked when he spoke. "I'm sorry. For what my ancestors did, for driving you down here." The figure made a soft clicking sound that might have been acknowledgement. Then it gestured broadly at the settlement, inviting us to look. We spent the next hour walking through their underground city. They showed us everything, their homes, their farming chambers where they grew those glowing mushrooms and pale root vegetables, their water collection systems that gathered seepage from the rock above. They showed us their library, a cave chamber filled with carved stone tablets covered in symbols I couldn't read but that clearly told stories. And they showed us their children, small figures with those same huge eyes, playing quietly in the blue light. There weren't many, maybe 20 kids total. A population this small couldn't sustain itself forever. The elder led us to another chamber, this one flooded with water. Recent flooding, I realized, looking at the water line on the walls. The dam construction upstream had changed the water flow, flooding parts of their home that had been dry for thousands of years. "This is why they've been coming to the surface more," I said to Robert. "Their home is being destroyed. The dam upstream, now the highway construction. We're crushing them between development projects without even knowing they're here." The elder made a series of clicking sounds, pointing at the flooded chamber, then up toward the surface, toward the construction site. "Monday," I said. "The blasting starts Monday. We have to stop it." We emerged from the caves just after midnight. Dr. Chen was waiting with news. She'd managed to get a temporary halt on the construction. The state archaeologist was coming in the morning to survey the site. "But it's only temporary," she warned. "We need to prove this is archaeologically significant, or they'll just delay it a few weeks and then blast anyway." "It's more than archaeologically significant," I said. "There are people living down there, a whole community." I spent the next 3 days documenting everything. Photos of the underground settlement, taken with just the blue glow for light flash photography, would have hurt their eyes. Samples of their tools, their woven materials, their cultivated food sources. Dr. Chen brought in other experts, a linguist to study their clicking language, a biologist to examine their extreme photosensitivity, an anthropologist specializing in pre-Columbian civilizations. The evidence was overwhelming. This was a living link to ancient history, a people who had survived in hiding for thousands of years. The state archaeologist was a stern woman named Patricia Vance. She went into the caves with a team of specialists and came out 6 hours later looking pale and shaken. "This changes everything we know about pre-Columbian North America," she said quietly. "We're talking about a continuous civilization spanning millennia, preserving knowledge that the surface world lost centuries ago. Those star charts alone," she shook her head. "We have to protect this site, whatever it takes." It took 3 months of legal battles, but the highway was rerouted. The cave system was declared a national monument, off limits to development. The surface entrance was sealed to everyone except a small group of approved researchers and me. I became the official liaison. The moon-eyed people trusted me, and I'd learned enough of their clicking language to communicate basic ideas. They didn't want to be studied like lab specimens. They just wanted to be left alone, to live in peace in the darkness they'd called home for so long. We worked out an arrangement. Dr. Chen and a small team could visit once a month, always at night, always respectful. In exchange, we helped them repair the water damage to their city and made sure no further construction would threaten their caves. The elder I learned their name was something like Star Watcher in their clicking language gave me something before we finalized the protection agreements. A stone tablet carved with astronomical observations that predated any telescope by thousands of years. "Your grandmother knew," I said to Robert when I showed it to him later. "She tried to tell us they were real, and we didn't believe her." "Maybe we weren't ready to believe," Robert said. "Maybe we needed proof before we could accept that we're not the only ones who belong here." I still work night patrol in the Nantahala, but now, once a week, I visit the caves. Star Watcher and I sit together in the blue glow, comparing star charts, mine printed on paper, theirs carved in stone. They've taught me things about celestial mechanics that science is only just beginning to understand. Sometimes, on the darkest nights, I see them on the surface, moving between caves, gathering surface plants they can't grow underground, looking up at the stars they've studied for millennia. They don't hide from me anymore. Sarah would have loved this. She always said I spent too much time looking at the stars and not enough time seeing what was right in front of me. Now I do both. The moon-eyed people survived because they learned to live in darkness. They adapted, they persisted, they preserved their knowledge through generations. They're still here, still watching, still reading the stars that their ancestors charted thousands of years ago. Most people who visit the Nantahala National Forest never know they're there. They hike the trails, camp by the rivers, and look up at those same stars without realizing that beneath their feet, an ancient civilization continues its long vigil in the darkness. I know better. I know that some things survive by hiding. Some knowledge is preserved in the deepest shadows, and sometimes, if you're patient enough and respectful enough, those shadows will let you in. My grandmother was right about something else too. She used to say that the old ones never really leave. They just wait, watching from the darkness, until someone is ready to see them. I was ready, and now I keep watch over the watchers, protecting their secret, preserving their home. Because some things are worth protecting. Some knowledge is worth preserving. And some people, no matter how different, no matter how ancient, deserve to live in peace. Every night, when I look up at the stars, I remember that I'm not the only one watching. Down in the blue-lit darkness, Star Watcher. And their people are looking up too, reading the same sky their ancestors mapped so long ago. We're all watchers here, under these mountains. All of us looking for answers in the darkness. All of us trying to understand our place in the universe. And sometimes, in the deepest dark, we find each other. My name is Robert Darkwater, and I've been a forest ranger for 16 years. People always ask about my last name. It comes from the creek that runs through these hills, the one my great-grandfather said was cursed. I never paid much attention to old stories until what happened in the fall of 1974. I work the eastern section of Daniel Boone National Forest in Kentucky, where the mountains are honeycombed with old coal mines. Most folks don't know that beneath these pretty hiking trails lie hundreds of abandoned tunnels from the 1,920 seconds and 1,940 seconds. My job is keeping people safe from cave-ins, gas leaks, and other dangers left behind when the mining companies pulled out. My daddy died in a mine collapse in 1951 when I was just 11. Maybe that's why I take this work so seriously. I know what happens when safety gets ignored for the sake of profit. Every sealed mine entrance I check, every warning sign I post, it's for families like mine who lost someone to corporate greed. At home, my wife Sarah teaches 3rd grade, and our twin boys are juniors in high school. They think their old man spends too much time worrying about empty holes in the ground. Dad, my son Mike always says, those mines have been closed longer than we've been alive. What's the worst that could happen? I keep my methane detector, heavy-duty flashlights, and emergency breathing gear in perfect condition. The mountains around here are full of natural gas pockets and bad air that can kill you before you know you're in trouble. I've pulled 3 people out of mine shafts over the years, 2 unconscious from gas, 1 with a broken leg from a cave-in. All of them were lucky. The Hellier Creek area is my biggest headache. There's a whole network of connected tunnels down there from the old Cumberland Mining Company. In 1943, an explosion killed 47 miners. The company said it was a gas leak, paid some money to the families, and sealed everything up. They never even recovered. All the bodies. I never believed in ghost stories or mine spirits. Bad air and unstable rock, DSS, that's what kills people underground. Not supernatural nonsense. When old-timers talked about the burning men they sometimes saw near the sealed entrances, I figured it was just methane hallucinations or guilt over the accident. That all changed on October 15th. 1974, when I got a call from Sheriff Thompson. "Robert, we got a strange report from some teenagers," he said. "They claim there's an orange glow coming from inside the old Cumberland mine entrance, the one that's been sealed for 30 years. I drove out there expecting to find kids with flashlights trying to scare each other. Instead, I found something I couldn't explain. The heavy steel plates that sealed the mine entrance were intact, but there was definitely light coming from behind them. A flickering orange glow like firelight. Standing there in the autumn evening, I noticed other things that bothered me. The air smelled strongly of sulfur, much more than the usual trace amounts from underground minerals. The grass and weeds around the mine entrance looked sickly, like something was poisoning them from below. And it was hot. Even though October nights in Kentucky are usually cool, the temperature near that sealed entrance felt like standing next to a furnace. My methane detector started clicking as soon as I got within 20 feet of the mine. But when I checked the readings, they didn't make sense. The device was picking up pure sulfur, something that shouldn't exist in those concentrations. I tried radioing back to headquarters, but my radio filled with static whenever I got close to the mine entrance. The interference cleared up as soon as I walked away, but returned the moment I approached the sealed opening. I spent 2 hours that night documenting everything with my camera and equipment, trying to find a logical explanation. Gas leak from a cracked seal? Underground? Electrical fire? Natural mineral deposits reflecting moonlight? None of my theories explain the handprints. They were burned into the stone around the mine entrance, human-shaped but wrong somehow. The fingers were too long. and they pointed outward like someone had been trying to claw their way out from inside. The stone around each print was blackened and cracked, as if exposed to intense heat. I took pictures and samples, filed my report, and recommended keeping the area closed to hikers. But that night, lying in bed next to Sarah, I couldn't stop thinking about those handprints. They looked fresh, like they'd been made recently, but the mine had been sealed since 1943. The next morning brought two more problems. First, Tom Brennan from the mining engineering office called to tell me that 3 more sealed mine entrances in the area were showing similar orange glows. Second, every dog in Hellier Creek was acting crazy, barking all night and refusing to walk anywhere near the old mining areas. Something was waking up down there in the dark, and I had the terrible feeling it had been waiting 31 years for someone to notice. The second day started with dead fish. Tom Brennan met me at the Cumberland mine site early that morning. He's a good man, 15 years of mining engineering experience and no patience for nonsense. But when he saw Hellier Creek running orange and counted 37 dead fish floating in a quarter-mile stretch, his face went pale. "Bob, I've seen mine drainage pollution before," he said, kneeling by the water. "This isn't it. Look at these fish. They're not poisoned. They're cooked." He was right. The fish looked like they'd been boiled alive. The creek water itself was warm to the touch, almost hot near where it flowed closest to the mine entrance. "Temperature readings?" I asked, pulling out my equipment. "Water's running at 98 degrees where it passes the mine. Air temperature spikes to 110 near the sealed entrance." Tom wiped sweat from his forehead. "Bob, it's 52 degrees everywhere else this morning." We spent the morning taking measurements and photos. The orange glow was visible even in daylight now, seeping through gaps where the steel plates met the rock. My radio still filled with static near the mine, and both our methane detectors went crazy with impossible readings. Then we heard it. At first it sounded like machinery, the distant rumble of mining equipment operating deep underground, pickaxes hitting stone, the metallic clang of ore cars on tracks, the rhythmic thump of pneumatic drills. "That's impossible," Tom whispered. "This mine's been sealed for 31 years. We looked at each other, listening to the sounds that definitely came from below our feet. Mining operations in full swing, maybe 100 feet down in tunnels that were supposed to be empty. "Could be some kind of echo," I said, but I didn't believe it. "Sound traveling from an active mine somewhere else." "Nearest working mine is 12 miles north," Tom replied. "And Bob, listen to those sounds. That's not modern equipment. That's the old stuff they used in the 40s. He was right again. I'd grown up around mining equipment because of my father. The sounds coming from below were from manual drilling and hand tools, not the mechanized systems they use now. The sounds continued for 20 minutes, then stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, we heard something else. Voices. Faint and distant, but definitely human voices, calling to each other underground. "Help me," one voice seemed to say. "Can't breathe," said another. "So hot. Burning." Tom grabbed my arm. "Those voices, Bob, they're coming from the sealed tunnels." That's when my equipment started malfunctioning in earnest. My flashlight flickered and died despite fresh batteries. Tom's electronic thermometer showed readings jumping from 70 degrees to 150 and back again. Both our watches stopped at exactly 11:43 a.m. The voices underground grew louder and more desperate. We could make out maybe 6 or 7 different men calling for help, pleading for air, screaming about the heat. But the voices had a strange quality, like they were echoing through water or coming from very far away. "We need to get help," Tom said. "Call the fire department, the mining rescue team." I tried my radio again, but it was useless near the mine entrance. We had to walk 50 yards away before I could raise headquarters. "This is Ranger Darkwater, requesting immediate assistance at the Cumberland mine site. We have possible trapped miners." "Negative, Robert," came the response. "Cumberland mine has been sealed and abandoned since 1943. No current mining operations in that area." "I understand that, but we're hearing voices from inside the sealed mine, men calling for help." A pause. "Are you certain, Robert?" "Affirmative. Request mining rescue team and emergency services." When we returned to the mine entrance to wait for help, the voices had stopped. The orange glow was dimmer. The air temperature had dropped back to normal. Even our equipment started working properly again. But pressed against the inside of the steel plates, We found something new. More handprints. Fresh ones. Dozens of them. All made from the inside, all reaching outward. And every print was burned into the metal like a brand. The rescue team arrived an hour later. They found no signs of current mining activity, no evidence of trapped workers, no unusual readings on any of their equipment. The mine entrance showed no signs of tampering. Their spokesman, Captain Morris, pulled me aside. "Bob, I know you're a good ranger, but there's nothing here. No one's been in this mine for 30 years. Maybe you heard sounds carrying from somewhere else." After they left, Tom and I stood alone at the mine site. The handprints were gone. The steel plates showed no signs of burning. Even the orange glow had faded to barely visible. "They think we're crazy," Tom said. "Maybe we are," I replied. But I was thinking about the voices we'd heard. Specifically, what they'd been saying. Not just calls for help, but something else. Something about company men who knew the gas was bad but sent them down anyway. Something about promises of safety that turned into death traps. That evening, I drove to the county library and looked up old newspaper reports about the 1943 explosion. What I found made my blood run cold. The disaster hadn't been quick. The miners had been trapped for 6 hours before the final explosion killed them all. They'd used their last working radio to send messages to the surface, begging for rescue, describing the unbearable heat and bad air. The Cumberland Mining Company executives had those radio transcripts, but they were sealed as part of the legal settlement with families. I was reading the voices of dead men, and somehow they were still calling for help. 3 days later, the teenagers went missing. Jenny Patterson, Mike Rodriguez, and Tommy Chen, all seniors at the local high school. Their friends said they'd been daring each other to spend Halloween night at the Cumberland mine site. When they didn't come home Thursday evening, their parents called Sheriff Thompson. By Friday morning, we had search teams combing the forest. The kids' car was found parked at the old mining road, but there was no sign of them anywhere above ground. "Bob," Sheriff Thompson said, "you know these old mines better than anyone. Could they have gotten inside somehow?" I checked every sealed entrance in a 2-mile radius. All the steel plates were intact and properly locked. But at the Cumberland site, I found something that made my stomach drop. Boot prints. 3 sets, leading right up to the sealed mine entrance. The prints stopped at the steel plates, but somehow continued on the other side. "That's impossible," Tom said when I called him out to look. "There's no way through those plates." But the evidence was right there in the mud and leaves. 3 teenagers had somehow walked through solid steel barriers and into a mine that had been sealed for 31 years. The orange glow was back, brighter than ever. Even in daylight, you could see it clearly through the gaps in the steel plates. The air temperature around the mine entrance was so hot that standing near it was like opening an oven door. My equipment went haywire immediately. Radio static, dead batteries, impossible readings. But this time, I could hear voices again. Not the desperate calls of the trapped miners from 1943, but younger voices. "Teenagers, help us." Jenny's voice echoed from deep underground. "We can't find the way out. It's so hot down here." That was Mike Rodriguez. "Something's burning. The burning men are coming." Tommy Chen, screaming in terror. Sheriff Thompson heard them too. "Jesus Christ, Bob, how did they get down there?" We organized an immediate rescue operation. The fire department brought cutting torches to open the sealed entrance. It took 2 hours to cut through the steel plates, and the whole time we could hear the kids calling for help from somewhere deep in the mine. But when we finally broke through the seal, the mine entrance was completely blocked by a cave-in. Tons of rock and timber filled the tunnel from floor to ceiling, just 15 feet from the entrance. No one could have gotten past that collapse, not in 31 years. "This doesn't make sense," Captain Morris said, shining his light into the blocked tunnel. "The voices were coming from inside, but there's no way anyone could be in there." We called in mining engineers with ground-penetrating radar. They confirmed that the cave-in was complete and had been there for decades. Beyond the collapse, the radar showed. The tunnel system was intact but inaccessible. Yet we could still hear the teenagers calling for help. That's when I remembered what my grandfather used to say about Hellier Creek. He claimed the water was cursed because it flowed through the old Indian burial grounds before the miners ever came. He said some places in the earth held on to pain and suffering, especially when people died unfairly. Tom, I said that evening as we stood guard at the mine site, what if the explosion in 1943 wasn't just an accident? He looked at me like I was losing my mind. What do you mean? I've been reading the old reports. Cumberland Mining Company received 3 different warnings about dangerous gas levels in that tunnel system. They sent the miners down anyway because they were behind on their coal quotas. So 47 men died because the company chose profit over safety. They knew it was dangerous and sent them down anyway. Tom was quiet for a long moment. You're talking about murder, Bob. I'm talking about something worse than murder. I'm talking about betrayal. Those miners trusted the company to keep them safe. As if responding to our conversation, the orange glow suddenly flared brighter. The temperature around the mine entrance spiked so high that we had to step back, and from deep underground came a sound that made both of us freeze with terror. Laughter. Cruel, echoing laughter that definitely wasn't human. Then the teenagers' voices again, but different now. Desperate beyond anything I'd ever heard. It's inside us, Jenny screamed. The fire is inside us. I can't stop burning. Mike's voice filled with agony. Please, somebody help us before we become like them. Tommy sobbing. The voices faded, but the laughter continued. Deep, rumbling laughter that seemed to come from the earth itself. Bob, Tom whispered. What the hell is down there? I was starting to understand, and the truth was worse than any ghost story. This wasn't just a haunting. This was something that fed on betrayal and suffering, something that had been growing stronger for 31 years on the pain of men who died because their bosses didn't care about their lives. And now it had 3 more victims. But there was something else bothering me. The timing. The Cumberland explosion happened in October 1943. It was now October 1974, exactly 31 years later. Tom, we need to research local folklore. See if there's any significance to 31-year cycles. What we found at the library that night chilled us to the bone. According to local Cherokee legends, certain evil spirits could only manifest fully every 31 years. The time it took for the earth to forget the pain of violent death and allow the spirits to walk freely. The coal seam devil, they called it, a creature that fed on the suffering of miners and grew stronger on their dying breath. Every 31 years, it could reach beyond the underground tunnels and claim new victims. 1,943. 47 miners died. 1,974. 3 teenagers taken. 1,905. According to old newspaper archives, 17 miners disappeared from a mine that later became part of the Cumberland system. The pattern went back over a century. Every 31 years, the coal seam devil fed. And now it was strong enough to start taking victims before its feeding time was over. As we drove back to the mine site, we could see the orange glow from 2 miles away. It lit up the entire hillside like a bonfire. When we got close enough, we realized why. The steel plates we'd cut through that morning had somehow been repaired and sealed again. But now the metal was glowing red hot, and burned into the surface were dozens of handprints, some large, some small, some human-sized, and some much bigger. And pressed against the inside of the glowing metal, we could see shapes moving, human figures walking back and forth behind the steel, their outlines visible like shadows on a lit curtain. 47 figures from 1,943. 3 smaller figures from this week. And something else, something much larger than human, with eyes like burning coals and arms that reached from wall to wall of the tunnel beyond. The coal seam devil had been waiting 31 years to add new souls to its collection, and it wasn't finished yet. Halloween night arrived with unseasonable heat and the smell of sulfur so strong you could taste it. The glow from the mine was visible from town now, a pillar of orange light reaching into the sky like a beacon. I knew what I had to do. You're not going down there, Sarah said when I told her my plan. Robert, you have a family, you have responsibilities. Those kids are down there because I didn't stop them, and if I don't end this tonight, it'll take more victims. Tom agreed to help, despite his wife's protests. We'd spent 3 days researching everything we could find about the coal seam devil and the Cumberland mine disaster. The Cherokee legends were consistent. The entity could only be stopped by someone willing to face it directly and speak the truth about how its victims died. At 11 p.m., we cut through the sealed mine entrance again. This time, there was no cave-in blocking the tunnel. The passage stretched deep into the mountain, glowing with orange light and radiating heat like the mouth of hell. "The air readings are off the charts," Tom said, checking his equipment. "Pure sulfur and methane. We should be dead just breathing this." But we weren't dead. Whatever was keeping the coal seam devil alive down there was also keeping us breathing. It wanted us to come deeper. The tunnel walls were covered with handprints, hundreds of them, burned into the rock. Some were clearly from the 1943 disaster, but others looked much older. Names were carved beside many of the prints, scratched into the stone by desperate fingers. James Murphy, 1905. William Chen, 1936. Robert Kowalski, 1943. And then, heartbreakingly fresh, Jenny P., 1974. We followed the tunnel for what felt like miles, though my watch had stopped working again. The heat increased steadily until sweat poured down our faces and our clothes stuck to our skin. The orange glow came from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, even the air itself seemed to burn. Then we heard the mining sounds again. Pickaxes, drilling, ore cars rattling on tracks. But now we could see where the sounds were coming from. Ghost miners, dozens of them, working the coal seam in endless repetition of their final day. Transparent figures swinging tools that passed through solid rock, loading coal cars that never filled, following safety procedures that had failed to save them. They moved like sleepwalkers, trapped in the moment of their betrayal. "The company said it was safe," one ghost miner muttered as he swung his pick. "Said they'd checked for gas. My wife, my children," another whispered. "Hauling an empty coal car." "They knew," a third one said, looking directly at us with eyes full of fire. "The bosses knew we'd die down here." At the heart of the mine, we found them. Jenny, Mike, and Tommy, sitting in a circle around something that hurt to look at directly. They were alive but changed. Their skin glowed with internal heat, and their eyes reflected orange light like mirrors. "Mr. Darkwater," Jenny said in a voice that echoed strangely. "We've been waiting for you." The thing in the center of their circle rose up like a pillar of living fire. It had the basic shape of a man, but was 12 feet tall, with arms that stretched too far and fingers like burning brands. Its face was coal black with eyes like furnace doors, and when it opened its mouth, flames poured out. "Another betrayer," it spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "Come to sacrifice the young for your safety." "No," I said, stepping forward despite the searing heat. "I came to tell the truth." The coal seam devil laughed, and the sound shook rock from the tunnel ceiling. "Truth? I know all truths. I know how they sent these men to D for profit. I know how they sealed us here to hide their crime." "You're right," I said. Cumberland Mining Company knew the gas levels were dangerous. They had 3 separate warnings. They sent the miners down anyway because they were behind on their coal quotas and didn't want to lose money. The entity paused, perhaps surprised that I agreed with it. "But that's not the whole truth," I continued. "The truth is that the miners who died here were good men, family men. They trusted their bosses to keep them safe, and that trust was betrayed. They died not because they were careless or unlucky, but because other people valued money more than human life." "Yes," the coal seam devil hissed. "And for this betrayal, I make them burn forever." "No," I said firmly. "For this betrayal, you've made them suffer twice. They died once from corporate greed. Now you're killing them again by trapping them here, forcing them to relive their worst moment forever." I looked at the ghost miners around us, still going through the motions of their final shift. "James Murphy, you died in 1905 when the mine owner ignored warnings about unstable support beams. William Chen, you died in 1936 when your foreman sent you into a tunnel he knew was filling with gas. Robert Kowalski, you died with 46 other men in 1943 when Cumberland Mining Company chose profit over safety." As I spoke their names, the ghost miners stopped their endless work and looked at me. "You all deserve justice," I continued. "You deserve to have your stories told, your deaths remembered, your families honored. But you don't deserve to burn for eternity because of what other people did to you." The coal seam devil roared in fury. "They are mine, their suffering feeds. Me. Their suffering feeds you because you've convinced them they deserve it. But they don't. The men who sent them to die, those are the ones who should suffer. I pulled out a folder I'd brought from the county records office. I've documented everything. The warnings Cumberland Mining ignored, the safety violations they covered up, the families they cheated out of compensation. The truth is going public. The men responsible will finally be held accountable. You lie. I'm a forest ranger, I said. My job is protecting people from the dangers left behind by mining companies. If I don't tell this story, more people will die in unsafe mines. More families will lose fathers and sons to corporate greed. For the first time, the coal seam devil seemed uncertain. What of the young ones? It asked, gesturing to Jenny, Mike, and Tommy. They made a mistake. They're guilty of being teenagers, not of murder. Let them go. And I promise you that the real criminals, the men who sent 47 miners to their deaths, will face justice. The coal seam devil stared at me with furnace eyes. Around us, the ghost miners had stopped working entirely and were watching our confrontation. If I release them, the entity said slowly, I lose the power to take revenge. No, I said, you lose the power to hurt innocent people. But the truth I'm going to tell will be a different kind of revenge. The kind that actually matters. The coal seam devil considered this. Then, slowly, it began to shrink. The flames around its body dimmed, and for the first time, I could see the human faces within the fire. It's gone. All the miners who had died, trapped in its burning form. Very well. It said in a voice now more human than demonic. But know this, Ranger, every miner who dies from corporate greed feeds my kind. Until all such deaths end, we will exist. The entity reached out with one burning hand and touched each of the teenagers. The orange glow faded from their skin, and they collapsed unconscious but breathing. Then, one by one, the ghost miners began to fade. But before they disappeared entirely, each one nodded to me, gesture of thanks that their deaths would finally be remembered and their stories told. The coal seam devil was the last to go. As it faded, it spoke one final time. Remember us, Ranger. Remember what happens when profit matters more than people. And then we were alone in a dark, cool tunnel with 3 unconscious teenagers and the weight of a promise I had to keep. The teenagers recovered fully, though they never spoke publicly about what happened in the mine. Jenny Patterson became a labor rights lawyer. Mike Rodriguez started a mine safety equipment company. Tommy Chen became a journalist who specialized in investigating corporate cover-ups. I kept my promise to the coal seam devil. The folder I'd brought to the mine was just the beginning. I spent the next 2 years documenting every safety violation, every ignored warning, every corner cut by Cumberland Mining Company and its executives. I tracked down surviving family members of the victims and helped them file wrongful death lawsuits that couldn't be covered up or bought off. The story made national news. Congressional hearings were held about mine safety regulations. New federal standards were implemented for monitoring abandoned mine sites. A memorial was erected at the Cumberland mine with the names of all 47 victims and the true story of how they died. Most importantly, the mine was properly sealed with concrete and steel, monitored by federal inspectors, and marked with warnings that couldn't be ignored or removed by local authorities. But some changes were more personal. I transferred to a different section of the forest. The Hellier Creek area holds too many memories now, and on certain October nights, I can still see a faint orange glow from the direction of the old mines. The coal seam devil is gone, but its warning remains. As long as corporations value profit over human life, as long as workers die from preventable accidents caused by greed, something like it will always exist. Sarah says, I've become obsessed with mine safety, and maybe she's right. I've testified at hearings in Washington, consulted on safety regulations in 3 states, and helped families of mining victims get justice in courts that used to automatically side with the companies. My boys think their dad is some kind of hero now, but they don't understand the full truth. I didn't defeat the coal seam devil through courage or cleverness. I defeated it by promising to do something that should have been done in 1943. Tell the truth about how those men died. Every year on Halloween night, I drive past the sealed Cumberland mine. There's no glow anymore, no supernatural heat, no voices calling for help. Just a quiet memorial stone and a carefully monitored site that will never again be a danger to hikers or curious teenagers. But I know the coal seam devil wasn't unique. Across the country, there are other places where workers died unnecessarily, where corporate profits mattered more than human lives, where the truth was buried along with the victims. And in some of those places, on certain nights, people report strange lights and impossible sounds, voices calling for help that will never come, seeking justice that's long overdue. I'm retired now, but I still get calls. A mine in West Virginia where safety inspectors hear drilling sounds from sealed tunnels. A factory in Ohio where workers report seeing figures in old-fashioned clothing walking the night shift. A construction site in Colorado where equipment operators claim their machines are being operated by invisible hands. The coal seam devil taught me something important. The dead don't rest easy when they've been betrayed by the living. Corporate greed leaves scars that go deeper than financial losses or legal settlements. It creates wounds in the very fabric of the earth that can take generations to heal. But it also taught me something else. Truth is the most powerful weapon against such entities. Not because truth destroys them, but because truth acknowledges them. It says their deaths mattered, their suffering was real, and their sacrifice won't be forgotten. That's why I'm telling this story now, 30 years later. Not because I think people will believe every detail, but because the core truth needs to be preserved. 47 miners died in 1943 because Cumberland Mining Company valued coal quotas more than human lives. Their names are on the memorial stone at the mine site. Their families finally received proper compensation. Their deaths led to safety regulations that have saved thousands of lives. But on quiet October nights, when the wind blows through the mountains of eastern Kentucky, you can still hear the distant sound of mining equipment operating in tunnels that have been sealed for decades. Not because the miners are still trapped, but because the earth itself remembers their final shift. And sometimes, if you listen carefully, you can hear something else. The voice of the coal seam devil, warning anyone who will listen that the price of greed is always paid by those who can least afford it. The mine is sealed now, the devil is gone, but the truth remains, and truth, once spoken, never dies. My name is William Thornfield, and I've been a forest ranger for 10 years now. I know these West Virginia mountains like the back of my hand, or at least I thought I did until the spring of 1957, when everything I believed about the world got turned upside down. I work alone most of the time, which suits me just fine. My ranger station sits 20 miles from the nearest town, deep in what locals call Panther Creek Hollow. It's beautiful country, thick forests, clear streams, and wildlife that most folks never get to see. I came here from Ohio after college, thinking I knew everything about plants and animals. The mountain people seemed backward to me then, with their talk of witches and spirits in the woods. I figured it was just old superstitions mixed with some knowledge about herbs. Boy, was I wrong. It started with a phone call on a cold morning in March. The voice on the other end belonged to Jeremiah Crawford, a farmer who lived about 5 miles down the mountain. "Ranger Thornfield, you need to come see this. Something's wrong with my cattle." "What kind of wrong, Mr. Crawford?" There was a long pause. "My cow just birthed a calf with 6 legs, and yesterday my neighbor's mare had a foal with 3 eyes." I almost hung up, thinking it was some kind of joke. But Jeremiah Crawford wasn't the joking type. He was a serious man who'd been farming these hills his whole life. "I'll be right there," I told him. The drive to Crawford's farm took me through the heart of Panther Creek Hollow. Something felt different that morning, though I couldn't put my finger on what. The air was too quiet, no bird songs, no squirrel chatter, nothing. Even my truck's engine seemed muffled, like the forest was swallowing the sound. When I got to Crawford's place, I saw he wasn't lying. The calf was alive but wrong in every way. 6 legs, yes, but they were arranged in a pattern that almost looked purposeful, like someone had planned it that way. The 3-eyed foal at the neighbor's farm was the same. The extra eye wasn't just a random mistake of nature. It sat right in the center of the forehead, perfectly formed and staring. "Started about a week ago," Crawford said, wrapping his arms around himself despite his thick coat. "First, it was just my animals acting strange. Wouldn't go near the upper pasture. Then this started happening." "Any idea what might be causing it?" I asked, though I was already running through possibilities in my head. Chemical contamination, maybe. Some kind of radiation. There had to be a scientific explanation. Old Ezra thinks he knows, Crawford said quietly. Ezra Mullins was probably the oldest person in the hollow, maybe 80 years old. Most folks went to him when they had problems the doctor couldn't fix. He knew more about plants and herbs than anyone, and he'd lived here his entire life. What does Ezra say? Crawford looked around like he was worried someone might be listening. Says the witch is stirring again. I tried not to roll my eyes. Mr. Crawford, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for this. Maybe something in the water, or you talked to Ezra. He interrupted. Then tell me about your reasonable explanations. That afternoon, I drove to Ezra's cabin. He lived even deeper in the woods than I did, in a place that felt like it belonged to another century. The old man was sitting on his porch when I arrived, almost like he'd been waiting for me. You're here about the animals, he said before I could speak. Yes, sir. I was hoping you might have some ideas about what's causing the birth defects. Ezra studied me with sharp gray eyes. You don't believe in the old stories, do you, Ranger? I believe in science, Mr. Mullins, and science says there has to be a reason for what's happening. He nodded slowly. Walk with me. We headed into the forest, following a path I'd never noticed before. Ezra moved, surprisingly well for his age, stepping over roots and rocks without even looking down. As we walked, he told me about the hollow's history. Back in the 1600s and 1700s, this place was different, he said. When they started burning witches back east, a lot of folks fled here. Healers mostly, women who knew about herbs and could help with births and sickness. They just wanted to be left alone. And were they? For a while, but fear travels fast, even into these mountains. Eventually, the witch hunters came here too. We stopped in a clearing I'd never seen before, though I thought I knew every inch of these woods. In the center stood the foundation of an old cabin, just stone outlines now, covered with moss and vines. This is where she lived, Ezra said. Martha Blackthorne, best healer these mountains ever saw. Could make the crops grow better, help animals birth healthy young ones, cure sickness that would kill other folks. I knelt down and looked at the foundation. Around it, herbs were growing in perfect circles, patterns too precise to be natural. Some of the plants I recognized, but others were completely unknown to me. They shouldn't have been growing at all in this cold weather. What happened to her? They came for her in 1698, burned her cabin with her inside it. But before she died, she swore she'd protect this place forever. Keep the old knowledge alive. I stood up, brushing dirt off my knees. And you think she's causing the birth defects? Ezra shook his head. Not causing them. Trying to prevent something worse. That's when I heard it, a sound like wind chimes, but there was no wind. The herb circles around the cabin foundation began to glow softly in the fading daylight, though I told myself it had to be some kind of reflection. She's here, Ezra whispered, and for just a moment, I saw her. A woman in a long dress, kneeling among the herbs. When she looked up at me, her eyes were full of sadness and warning. Then she was gone, like she'd never been there at all. My camera hung around my neck, but when I tried to take pictures, every single shot came out blank. My radio crackled with static that almost sounded like voices speaking in a language I'd never heard. Standing there in that clearing, with the impossible herbs glowing around an ancient foundation, I felt something I'd never experienced before. The certainty that everything I thought I knew about the world was wrong. The witch was real, and she was trying to tell me something. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's face among the herbs. When morning came, I decided to approach this like any other investigation. I'd document everything, take samples, and find a rational explanation. But the hollow had other plans. When I got back to the cabin foundation, the herb circles had changed. They were bigger now, more complex, and new plants had appeared overnight, plants that had no business growing in West Virginia soil. Some had leaves shaped like nothing I'd ever seen in any botanical guide. I collected samples and tried to radio back to headquarters, but all I got was static. The same voices Ezra and I had heard the day before, speaking that unknown language, but this time I could almost understand a few words. They sounded like warnings. My truck wouldn't start. The engine turned over fine, but it wouldn't catch, like something was preventing me from leaving. I ended up walking the 5 miles to Crawford's farm, and found him standing in his yard with a rifle in his hands. "Thank God you're here," he said. "It's getting worse." 3 more calves had been born in the night. But these weren't just deformed, they were changed in ways that seemed impossible. One had thick gray skin that looked almost like armor. Another had eyes that reflected light like a cat's, even in daylight. The third had extra organs visible through translucent skin on its sides. "They're healthy, though," Crawford said, and his voice was full of confusion. "Stronger than normal calves, and they don't seem to be in any pain." That's when it hit me. The birth defects weren't random. They were adaptations, like something was preparing these animals for what? I spent the morning examining the animals and taking notes. The changes were too purposeful to be accidents of nature. Someone or something was modifying these creatures deliberately. But why? Around noon, Mrs. Patterson from the next farm over came running to Crawford's place. She was crying and could barely get the words out. "It's my daughter," she gasped. "Sarah's pregnant, and something's wrong. She's only been carrying for 3 months, but she looks ready to give birth. And the baby's moving wrong inside her." We drove to the Patterson farm as fast as Crawford's old truck would carry us. Sarah Patterson was 19 years old and had gotten married just 6 months ago. She was sitting on her front porch, her belly swollen far beyond what it should have been for 3 months. But that wasn't the strangest part. Her skin was glowing, faintly like moonlight on water, but definitely glowing, and when the baby moved, you could see its outline clearly through her skin, too clearly. The shape wasn't quite right either. The proportions were off, like something was growing extra limbs or organs. "It doesn't hurt," Sarah said when she saw me staring. "That's the weird part. I feel stronger than I've ever felt in my life. But I'm scared. This isn't natural." I knelt down next to her and listened to her belly with my ear. 2 heartbeats, which was normal. But there was something else, a humming sound, almost like electricity. When did this start? 3 days ago, right after I walked through the hollow picking wildflowers. I found the most beautiful clearing with herbs growing in perfect circles. When I touched one of the picking plants, I felt different. My blood went cold. She'd been to Martha Blackthorn's cabin. That evening, I met Ezra back at the foundation. The herb circles were even larger now, and the glow was bright enough to read by. But that wasn't what made my hands shake as I wrote in my notebook. There were other foundations now, dozens of them, arranged in a large circle around Martha's cabin. Each one had its own herb garden, and each garden was tended by a figure I could barely see, women in long dresses, moving between the plants like they were caring for children. "She's calling them back," Ezra said quietly. "All the healers who died here. They're preparing for something." Preparing for what? Before he could answer, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. Trucks, military trucks, from the sound of the engines. And they were heading toward the hollow. We hid behind some trees as a convoy of army vehicles drove past on the old logging road. 12 trucks, all painted with radiation warning symbols. They stopped about a mile from Martha's cabin and started setting up equipment. "What are they doing here?" I whispered. Ezra's face had gone pale. "Testing," he said. "They've been doing atomic tests underground, all through these mountains, contaminating the groundwater, poisoning everything." That's when it all clicked together. The birth defects weren't random mutations, they were protections. Martha's spirit and the other healers were trying to help the animals and people survive radiation poisoning. The extra organs, the thicker skin, the glowing, it was all designed to help them live in a contaminated world. But why hadn't anyone told the local people about the testing? As if reading my thoughts, one of the soldiers walked close enough for me to hear him talking on his radio. "Yes, sir. The locals have no idea we're here. The contamination readings are off the charts, but the wildlife seems to be adapting somehow. We need to study these mutations before we expand the testing program." They weren't just poisoning the land, they were planning to make it worse. That night, as I sat in my ranger station trying to figure out what to do, Martha Blackthorn appeared in my kitchen. She looked exactly like she had in the clearing, but now I could see her clearly. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30 years old, with long dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind through leaves. "They will kill everything," she said. "The poison from their tests will spread through the water, through the soil. Every living thing in these mountains will die unless we protect them. How? I asked, surprised that I was talking to a ghost like it was perfectly normal. Help us. You understand plants? Understand the science. We can teach you the old ways, and you can teach others. But you must choose now. They plan to begin the next round of testing tomorrow. She held out her hand, and I saw that her palm was covered with tiny herbs, each one glowing with its own light. Touch them, and you'll understand. I hesitated for only a moment. Then I reached out and touched the herbs in her ghostly palm. The knowledge hit me like lightning. I suddenly understood how the plants worked, how they could change living things to help them survive. I saw the connections between all the herbs in the forest, the way they communicated with each other and with the spirits of the healers. And I saw the future Martha was trying to prevent, a dead wasteland where nothing could live. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. The next morning brought news that made my stomach drop. 3 more women in the hollow were pregnant, all showing the same impossible rapid development as Sarah Patterson. But worse than that, the army had set up a perimeter around the entire area. No one could get in or out without going through their checkpoint. When I tried to drive out to get help, a soldier stopped me at a roadblock. "Sorry, sir. This area is under temporary military jurisdiction. Environmental contamination study. For your own safety, we need you to remain in the designated area." "I'm a federal employee," I said, showing him my ranger badge. "I need to file reports with my supervisors." The soldier, barely old enough to shave, looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, sir. Orders are orders. No one leaves until the study is complete." They were trapping us here while they finished whatever they were planning to do. I drove back through the hollow, stopping at every farm to check on the animals and the pregnant women. The changes were accelerating. The cattle now had thick, radiation-resistant hides. The horses had developed extra organs that seemed designed to filter toxins from their blood, and the women were glowing brighter, their unborn children moving with an intelligence that seemed almost supernatural. But it was when I got to the old cabin foundation that I realized how serious things had become. The circle of ghost healers had grown to include dozens of women, all working frantically among herbs that now covered nearly an acre. But they weren't alone anymore. The army had discovered the site and set up monitoring equipment all around it. I watched from the tree line as soldiers took readings and collected samples. Their Geiger counters were clicking so fast they sounded like machine guns. One of the officers was talking excitedly into his radio. "The radiation levels here are impossible, but somehow the plant life is thriving. These mutations could be the key to human survival in a post-atomic world. We need to capture samples of everything, the plants, the animals, and especially the affected humans." My blood ran cold. They wanted to take the pregnant women. That afternoon, they tried to do exactly that. Military vehicles surrounded the Patterson farm while I was visiting Sarah. An officer with medical corps insignia knocked on the door. "Ma'am, we're here to help. You and your baby need immediate medical attention. We're going to transport you to a facility where we can better monitor your condition." Sarah's husband, Tommy, stepped between the officer and his wife. "She's fine right here. The baby's healthy, and so is she." "Sir, that's impossible. The level of radiation exposure in this area should have killed her by now. We need to understand how she's surviving." That's when Sarah stood up and walked to the door. The glow around her had intensified overnight, and when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that made even the soldiers step back. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, "and neither is my baby. This is our home, and we're protected here." The officer tried to argue, but something strange happened. Every time he started to speak, his words came out wrong. Like his tongue wouldn't work properly. The other soldiers began backing away, their faces filled with confusion and fear. "What's happening to us?" one of them whispered. I knew. The spirits were protecting Sarah, just like they were protecting all the Hollow's people. But the army wouldn't give up that easily. That night, Ezra and I met at the cabin foundation. The ghost healers were working furiously now, tending to plants that seemed to grow taller and brighter every hour. Martha appeared as soon as we arrived. "They plan to take everyone tomorrow," she said. "The women, the children, the animals. They want to study how we've protected them." "Can you stop them?" I asked. Her expression was grim. "We can protect the people, but not for long. The testing they plan to do tomorrow will poison the water so badly that even our magic won't be enough. Everything will die." "What kind of testing?" They want to detonate an atomic device underground, here, in the heart of the hollow. They think the radiation will help them understand the mutations better. I felt sick. They were going to turn this entire area into a radioactive wasteland just to study how Martha's magic worked. There has to be something we can do, I said. There is, Martha replied, but it requires a living person to help us. Someone who understands both the old ways and the new science. She was looking right at me. What would I have to do? Tomorrow, when they try to detonate their device, you'll need to be at the blast site. We can channel our power through you, use your knowledge of their science to turn their own weapon against them. But the radiation exposure, even with our protection, it will change you forever. I thought about Sarah Patterson and her glowing skin, about the children being born with impossible adaptations, about the army officers who wanted to study them like laboratory animals. Will it save everyone? The people? Yes. The animals? Yes. The land itself? Maybe. But you'll never be the same. I looked around at the dozens of ghost women tending their impossible gardens, working desperately to save a world they no longer belonged to. They'd been burned alive for trying to protect people. The least I could do was risk the same thing. Tell me what I need to do. The army moved at dawn. I watched from my ranger station as trucks surrounded every farm in the hollow. Soldiers in radiation suits were going door to door, forcing families out of their homes at gunpoint. The pregnant women were loaded into special medical transports, while their husbands and children were herded into regular trucks. I could hear Sarah Patterson screaming as they carried her away from her home. The glow around her was so bright now that it hurt to look at directly, but that just made the soldiers more excited. They thought they'd found the key to surviving atomic war. The blast site was set up right at Martha's cabin foundation. They'd brought in a device that looked like a small missile, rigged to detonate underground. The officer in charge, a colonel with cold blue eyes, was explaining the test to his subordinates. The device will create a controlled atomic explosion 50 feet below the surface. The radiation should interact with whatever's causing these mutations. We'll finally understand how living tissue can adapt to extreme radioactive exposure. What they didn't understand was that they were about to blow up the spiritual heart of the hollow, the place where Martha and all the other healers had focused their power for centuries. I had to get down there before they set off the bomb. I waited until most of the soldiers were busy loading the captured families into trucks. Then I slipped out of my station and made my way through the forest toward the blast site. But I wasn't alone. As I walked, I could see the ghost healers walking with me, dozens of women in long dresses, their forms becoming more solid with each step. By the time I reached the edge of the clearing, they were as real as I was. Martha appeared beside me, no longer translucent but solid and determined. "Are you ready?" I nodded, though I was terrified. The herbs Martha had given me the night before were in my pocket, already warm against my skin. When the bomb went off, they would channel the healer's power through me, turning the atomic energy into something that could protect rather than destroy. But first, I had to get close to the device. I walked into the clearing like I belonged there, trying to look official. The soldiers barely glanced at me, just another government employee checking on the test. The colonel was standing near the detonation device, counting down on his watch. T-5 minutes, he called out. I knelt down next to the bomb, pretending to check some readings. The herbs in my pocket were getting hotter, and I could feel power building around me like the air before a thunderstorm. The ghost healers formed a circle around the entire clearing, their hands raised and their voices joining in a chant that sounded like wind through leaves. T-2 minutes. The soldiers started backing away from the blast site. Soon, I would be alone with the bomb and the spirits of dead women who'd been murdered for trying to protect people. T-1 minute. I pulled the herbs from my pocket. They were glowing now, so bright that I had to squint to look at them. The power flowing through them felt like lightning made of starlight. T-30 seconds. Martha knelt beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "Remember," she whispered, "we're not trying to stop the explosion. We're trying to change what it does." T-10 seconds. I pressed the herbs against the side of the atomic device. They immediately burned into the metal, sinking into the bomb like water into soil. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The world exploded in light. But it wasn't the harsh, deadly light of atomic fire. It was the soft, green glow of growing things. The explosion that should have poisoned the hollow for generations instead sent waves of healing energy through the ground, the water, the air itself. I felt the radiation hit me like a physical blow, but instead of burning, it transformed. The herbs Martha had given me channeled the atomic energy into something else entirely, a force that could heal instead of destroy, protect instead of contaminate. Around me, the ghost healers were glowing with the same green light, their forms becoming more solid as the transformed radiation fed their spirits. The bomb's crater filled with water so pure it looked like liquid crystal. And from that water, new herbs began to grow, plants that could clean radiation from soil, purify poisoned water, and heal the damage that atomic testing had done to the land. When the light faded, I was still alive. But I was changed. Just as Martha had warned. My skin had the same soft glow as Sarah Patterson's, and I could feel new knowledge flowing through my mind, understanding of how plants and animals and people could work together to heal a wounded world. The colonel and his soldiers were unconscious, knocked out by the force of the transformed explosion. But they were alive, and when they woke up, the radiation detectors would show that the hollow was cleaner now than it had been before the test. Martha smiled at me, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked peaceful. "It's done," she said. "The land is protected. Our people are safe. What happens now? Now you teach them. The old ways and the new science, working together. You help them understand that healing and protecting are more powerful than any weapon." The ghost healers were fading now, their work finally complete. But before Martha disappeared, she handed me a seed that glowed with green fire. "Plant this," she said, "and remember us." The official report said the atomic test had failed due to unexpected geological conditions. The radiation readings showed that not only had the device not contaminated the area, but somehow the background radiation levels had actually decreased. The colonel and his team were reassigned, and the testing program in West Virginia was quietly shut down. The pregnant women were returned to their homes, their children born healthy and strong. Sarah Patterson's baby was the first, a little girl who could make plants grow just by touching them. The other children had their own gifts. Some could purify water with their hands, others could heal sick animals just by being near them. As for me, I kept my job as a forest ranger, but my duties changed. I became the official liaison between the government and the hollow communities, documenting the unusual but beneficial adaptations that had resulted from the failed atomic test. My reports were filed away and forgotten, which was exactly what we wanted. I planted Martha's seed in the center of her cabin foundation. It grew into a tree unlike any other. Its leaves could neutralize radiation, its roots could clean poisoned soil, and its bark could heal burns and sickness. People began making pilgrimages to visit it, and slowly, the knowledge of healing spread beyond the hollow. Ezra lived for 10 more years, teaching the old ways to anyone who would listen. Before he died, he made me promise to keep the stories alive. "Don't let them forget," he said. "Don't let them think that science and spirit have to be enemies. The hollow is still here, still protected. My skin still glows faintly in the dark, and I can still hear Martha's voice in the wind through the trees. Sometimes, tourists come looking for the miracle tree they've heard about, hoping it will cure their ailments or solve their problems. I always tell them the same thing. The real miracle isn't the tree. It's the understanding that healing takes time, patience, and respect for forces older than atomic bombs. The earth knows how to take care of itself, if we just stop trying to destroy it." But I also tell them to be careful. The government never really stopped its testing, they just moved it somewhere else. And there are other hollows, other communities that need protection from the poison that powerful men call progress. Martha Blackthorn's spirit still walks these woods, tending to her impossible gardens, and sometimes, when the moon is dark and the forest is quiet, she teaches others the old ways of healing. Because the world is going to need healers in the years to come, more than it's ever needed destroyers.